The story begins in the midst of a fierce primitive battle, as Eren opened his eyes and found himself in this medieval fantasy world. Disoriented and confused, he struggled to recall how he got there, but with no other option, he became a mercenary to survive. He had no other choice but to slash down enemies one by one, just to stay alive. Back to the current war, Eren charged forward with his long sword as he targeted a well-built man. But to his amazement, that freaking giant blocked the blow with his bare hands. Before Eren could react further, another muscular giant emerged from behind, his eyes filled with anger as he raised his weapon to strike Eren, but out of the blue, a woman wearing heavy armor, riding on a horse, intruded in and slashed the enemy in half in an instant. She warned everyone to stay focused, otherwise they would be dead in the blink of an eye. It was essential for everyone to not let their guards down for even a moment on the battlefield. With a fierce cry, she commanded to blow the trumpet and announced the forces to charge forward. As soldiers from opposing sides closed in, they clashed fiercely, and the sharp clang of swords echoed across the battlefield. Hours rolled by, the shrieks and cries of the soldiers began fading, and at last, all who were left was Eren, exhausted and injured, whose only wish was to survive in that world, and the other woman who was equally half dead. She persuaded him with a pleasing look, remarking that Eren had survived this time too. She immediately placed her soft, gentle hand on his face, inspected his wounds, and playfully asked him to make sure his handsome face remained intact. As they were sharing their peaceful moments, the sky darkened and rain began to pour down, but the woman only shrugged and remarked that she likes the rain. As her voice faded from Eren's mind, the scene shifted to the present, where he found himself in the middle of a medieval town. Thinking about that woman, she wanted to go east once the war was over, in the east where the rain hardly stopped. Eren's dead eyes were longing for her presence, her smell, her body. Out of nowhere, a group of men appeared before him, who were quite eager to catch someone before they could escape the castle. Just then, two other men came and called out for Captain Eren. One of them was Vermin, while the other one was named Kale, who was also known as the previous handsome man. Eren questioned about the other members, to which they assured him they would arrive soon. On the spur of moment, Vermin exclaimed that it was quite astonishing to see that the gentle Hans would cause such a big accident, while Kale complained he was always a pain in the ass. Hans was a mage, but they commented that mages can't be trusted in the first place. Moreover, rumors were around that Hans might have made a pact with a demon. Eren seemed quite intrigued about this remark. However, Vermin burst out laughing, stating that Kale was just jealous of Hans because he had lost the nickname Handsome to him. Embarrassed, Kale argued, but Vermin further teased him, revealing that he'd never been called handsome in the first place. Being completely worn out because of their bickering, Eren began to leave that place. Upon questioning, he disclosed that he was moving towards the headquarters, and with that, both of them began walking alongside Eren. As they strolled along, Vermin remarked that Hans' nickname would probably change to Handsome even if only his head is left. The joke sent both of them into laughter, while Eren was indifferent and thought to himself that Hans would probably be hanged if he get caught. Soon after, they arrived at Kasserdik Outer Fortress Guard headquarters, and as Eren stepped inside, he was greeted by Guard Commander Manuel, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. He inquired about Eren's late arrival, to which he simply responded that he fell into a deep sleep. Furthermore, Manuel interrogated about close relationship with the criminal Hans and inquired whether all of that was true. Though it was true, but only to some extent. Hans was an unusually intelligent lad at such an early age. They remained close even after Hans entered the Magic Academy. However, agreeing will only make things more complicated. Eren outright denied the fact, stating that they barely exchanged greeting as they passed by. Manuel shared with Eren that the situation was fortunate, but revealed that the incident wasn't just a simple crime. It was linked to the Lord's daughter, and Hans has stolen something very precious, something that wasn't meant to be stolen. Manuel stepped forward and firmly stated that in such a critical situation, if the Kasserdik Guard captured the criminal, it would greatly please the Lord. His expression hardened as he issued a grave command to Eren to bring Hans in, dead or alive. Without hesitation, Eren accepted the order, knowing that the matter directly involved the Lord himself. He silently cursed Hans, as he was the sole reason Eren had come dangerously close to losing his head. As Eren departed, he was met by Unit 4 of the Kasserdik Fortress Guard. Vermin approached and informed him that everything had been set up and ready to go. As the unit strolled under the heavy rain, navigating the dark alleys of District 7, Kale wondered aloud if Hans could truly be hiding in that filthy district, even if those mazes were prone to be crazy. Moreover, Hans had a weak stomach too. Those men were full of complaints about that nasty and muddy alleyways, which even lacked proper toilet facilities. They even thought of slacking and pretend to look for Hans, so that they could enjoy some beer in a nice bar instead. However, Eren's eyes blazed in fury as he silenced them with a stern command, though he was quite amazed at his foolish companions, who could even think of leisure even when their heads were on the line. As Eren strolled further in that crappy neighborhood, his eyes struck on a mysterious figure sporting an old brown hood. Aaron immediately clutched his sword and demanded that mysterious man to take off his hood. Unexpectedly, the man sneered and remarked that it had been a while since he'd seen Aaron. He pulled back his hood, revealing his face, but before he could say anything further, Aaron smacked the shit out of him, sending the man crashing to the ground. Aaron shot a glare at the man and demanded to know if he had been caught for causing some problems. However, to his surprise, the man denied it and explained that he was merely a herbalist from the alley, about to report a theft when things escalated. Something clicked in Aaron's mind as he studied the man and remarked that he looked somewhat familiar. The herbalist screeched in protest, demanding to know why Aaron had suddenly hit him and caused a scene. Frustrated, he grumbled about his crappy day, complaining that all of his herbs had been stolen. What baffled him most was that the thief had stolen only grimroot, a common plant that grew in abundance all over the hills behind town. Aaron immediately connected the dots. Knowing that grimroot leaves were used to stop bleeding, he quickly asked the herbalist where the thief had gone. Sometime later, Aaron finally found an injured man slumped against a wall, his arm heavily bleeding. It was none other than Hans himself. With an indifferent expression, Aaron stated that Hans was someone who always kept things neat and clean, yet now he had pathetically injured himself. Letting out a sigh, he told him to come quietly. However, instead of complying, Hans began chanting. With a flick of his hand, the water pool nearby surged up, swirling around him like a living barrier. Aaron was stunned by the force of Hans' magic. Meanwhile, Hans looked at him with a faint, almost regretful expression and stated that it was not the time for him to be caught yet. Just as Aaron was recovering, he was slammed by the water again, the force of it sending him stumbling backward. But it wasn't over yet. Despite his own injuries, Hans refused to give up and poured all of his remaining energy into the magic. His eyes were blazed with determination, and his hands moved with a fierce precision. Moreover, water magic on a rainy day was an annoying coincidence. However, Aaron refused to give up, and he summoned his strength for a final strike. With swift precision, he lunged at Hans, determined to overpower him. Hans, caught off guard, barely had time to react, began spluttering chants before Aaron's sword sliced through the air, striking his neck. As the smoke finally cleared, Hans came into view, his body withered and exhausted. Tears poured down his cheeks, and with a trembling yet gentle voice, he pleaded with Aaron, asking if he would spare his life. Ignoring his desperate request, Aaron instead stated that he had heard rumors about Hans signing a contract with a demon. If those rumors were true, there would be a scar near his heart as proof of the pact. Without hesitation, Aaron inspected Hans' chest, but to his surprise, there was not a single scratch on his body. Aaron's expression hardened as he demanded to know why Hans did something like that when he had never made a deal with a demon in the first place. Hans' face stiffened, his body trembling slightly, and with a fatigued voice, he admitted that it would be hard for Aaron to understand even if he explained. However, he added that one day Aaron would uncover the truth himself. Aaron's head felt like it was going to explode with all of Hans' blabbering, but he quickly pushed aside his frustration. Without another word, he pulled out a recovery potion and poured it over Hans' wounded arm, making him shrieking in pain. Once the potion had soaked into the injury, Aaron gave him a strict order to follow. Without hesitation, he tore down a set of old planks from the nearby wall, revealing a hidden passage concealed behind them. He stared at Hans for a moment, wondering if losing an arm for stealing was enough for punishment, but in the end, it was not his place to judge. In this medieval world, justice was concluded to two outcomes, innocence or death. With a stern voice, Aaron commanded Hans to leave. Hans' face immediately brightened as he expressed his heartfelt gratitude, even calling Aaron his brother. However, before he could speak anything further, Aaron swiftly delivered a heavy smack to his face, sending him tumbling against the wall. Aaron's expression darkened with irritation as he warned Hans to get lost and never call him brother again. With one last glance, Hans thanked him and went on his way inside the tunnel. Just as he left, Aaron was alerted to the noise made by his companions, who began to search the remaining area. Meanwhile, Hans has completely disappeared from the small fortress of the Casertic eastern frontier. Aaron's mind was consumed by disappointment as he thought about how Hans' reputation had changed. The nicknames that once reflected Hans' good qualities, handsome, kind, friendly, had now changed to the shameful title of Casertic Ladies' Undergarments Thief. Aaron could no longer deny the truth and had to accept that Hans was a pervert. Though in that medieval world where cleanliness, laws, and ethics were utterly primitive, Aaron was forced to become a guard captain in that chaotic world. The scene shifted to the headquarters, where Unit 4 of Casertic's Fortress Guard had gathered for an emergency meeting to discuss Hans' disappearance. Seething with frustration, Kale complained that despite searching every corner of Casertic Fortress, they had failed to capture Hans. Though irritated, he couldn't help but admit he was somewhat impressed by the mage's ability. Brake, the youngest member of the unit, stepped forward and wondered aloud if Hans had used magic to escape. Before he could finish, Poole immediately shut him down, calling him an idiot and stating that they wouldn't even have arms if everything was supposed to be done through magic. Tired of their constant bickering, Carter and another member of the unit let out a shaky sigh and pleaded with them to be quiet. True to his nickname, the Sleepyhead, Carter complained that he hadn't slept for more than 5 hours in the past 3 days and was so exhausted he felt like he could drop dead at any moment. Vermin sighed at his dramatic whining and pointed out that no one had ever actually died from lack of sleep. However, before he could finish, Poole intervened in his usual hoarse voice, saying that if anyone could, it would probably be Brig. Brushing past their chatter, Vermin brought the conversation back on track, stating that the search was officially over, and he advised everyone to get some proper rest. The focus then shifted to Aaron, who was met by William, a man who radiated sharp determination and authority. As the vertex of Casterdick's guard, he was someone who would easily slice Aaron's head in an instant or throw him into the underground prison without a second thought for the rest of his life. With a cold, serious tone, William stated that rumors were spreading about Aaron's connection to the wanted criminal Hans. He further pointed out that Aaron had been patrolling the last remaining district, District 7, completely alone and had failed to uncover anything. Coincidentally, it was also the one area where internal guards can't look into. He shot glares at Aaron as if he was interrogating whether he helped Hans escape. However, Aaron remained unfazed by his unspoken threats and calmly replied that he had found nothing aside from garbage. Without warning, William turned his attention to Manuel, catching him completely off guard. With a casual yet piercing tone, he remarked that the cigarettes Manuel had given him were quite good. Then, in a more pointed manner, he questioned how Manuel could afford such an expensive item with his small salary. Manuel stiffened, his face paling as he stuttered that it was a gift from a very distant relative. William's sharp eyes pierced into him as he asked in a stern voice whether he had stolen or embezzled them. Panicked, Manuel actively denied the accusation. Without another word, William crushed his cigarette against Aaron's leather strap and declared that anyone who committed a crime or helped a criminal would meet their end by his hand. However, Aaron brushed that aside with a fake smile and casually assured William that he would keep that in mind. With the sunset approaching, casting a warm glow over the village, Aaron was seen off by Kale and Vermin. His mood was already ruined as he muttered about how these medieval people had no sense of human rights. His thoughts lingered on Hans, wondering if he had managed to slip away without getting caught. As he strolled down the quiet streets, a sudden scream pierced the air and came from the direction of a nearby inn. Inside, Henna, the innkeeper of the Laughing Rabbit, was being harassed by a group of men. She struggled to free herself as one of them gripped her arm tightly. She demanded that they let go, but Dylan, the leader of the group, smirked and told his companion to treat her like a gentleman. He claimed they haven't been in that village for a long time and were just trying to make some local friends, then added with a chuckle that they were looking for the kind of friendship that could be shared in bed. Upon hearing that indecent joke, his companions burst into laughter. Henna sighed, crossing her arms as she guessed they were mercenaries from another country. She warned them that if they kept behaving this way, it would only cause trouble for them in the end, further asking them to stop before they regret their choices. Dylan's smirk faded as he slammed his hand against the wooden table, asking what she planned to do if they didn't listen. He drew near to her, his actions clearly inappropriate as he exposed her chest and asked if some kind of guard would come save her. Her further added that there was no way that some guy would come to take care of this isolated shabby inn, but as soon as he said that, Aaron slammed the door open and made his entry. Henna's, as well as the other troubled bystander's face, lightened upon seeing him. She swiftly moved to his side and concealed herself behind him, while the villains drew near them. But instead of reacting immediately, Aaron turned to Henna and proposed a 10-day period, but Henna countered it with 5 days, arguing that it was his duty as a guard. Their persistent arguing infuriated Dylan and the others who felt overlooked. Infuriated, Dylan asked how could they ignore them in their presence, while one of his men, a bald brute, had enough and lunged at Aaron with a clenched fist. But before the attack could land, Aaron caught the man's head mid-charge, still focused on his conversation. As Aaron complained about the guy's medieval foul-talking habit, he made a deal with Henna to free lodge for 6 days and free dinner for the day, and she immediately agreed. With the deal settled, Aaron sighed in satisfaction and then, without hesitation, slammed the brute's head into the wall, muttering about how medieval people needed proper discipline. Dylan and his group froze, stunned at how easily their companion was taken down. Meanwhile, the bystanders cheered for Aaron, exclaiming that they were waiting for those thugs to come and get beaten up like this. They were so thrilled that they asked Henna for more liquor. The reason they became regulars in that Laughing Rabbit Inn was solely because there was a monster like Aaron living there, who was the greatest human cleaner in Casterdick and a rogue captain of the guards. Those people were persistently cheering for Aaron, prompting him to beat those thugs up, while Aaron, though that someday he would give those bystanders a lesson too. As Dylan, roughed and bruised, reached for his knife, Aaron locked eyes with him and asked if he truly intended to take that knife out. But to everyone's surprise, Dylan denied with an awkward chuckle and laughed it off in an instant. And just like that, the trouble was over. Just like that, the day had passed, and night had fallen, and Eren was peacefully resting in his chamber, with his sword beneath his pillow. Though his sleep wasn't as peaceful as it seemed to be because he was trapped in a nightmare. As he lay trapped in his nightmare, an unfamiliar voice whispered, gifting him the name Eren as he didn't possess any. The woman who had rescued him in the battlefield reappeared, injured and bloodied, asking him to flee and never return as he must live on. Eren jolted awake from his nightmare. He swiftly drew his sword, only to have his eyes overflow with tears when he realized that it was all a dream. The following day, Eren was shown in the midst of a rigorous training, his sword slicing through the air with remarkable speed. He wondered it had already been 6 years since he fell into this world, questioning to himself, when will he be able to maintain this daily routine? As he was preoccupied with his thoughts, an unfamiliar figure emerged, commenting upon his swords having no frills. He further stated that he didn't know there was a skilled man in the borders of Kasserdik. Upon his unexpected arrival, Eren remained silent and studied his armor with the symbol of Fëanor family and his spiral rapier. Eren instantly recognized that he was a knight. Knights, a formidable group that wielded aura and fought against demons, surpassing human limits. They were known as the Sword of Humanity. Eren assumed that if Ben was from the Fëanor family, then he must be a knight from the distant Bolt Fortress. It made him wonder why someone like him had traveled all the way to Kasserdik, wondering if the Empire had sent him. Eren's grip on his sword tightened slightly, but Ben noticed and quickly assured him that there was nothing to be wary of. He explained that he was simply excited to witness Eren's swordsmanship. Before Ben could ask more about him, a sharp and high-pitched voice called out from behind. A stunning blonde woman stepped forward, her expression impatient. She questioned how an escort could leave her behind and wander off on his own. She was none other than Vivian Fulputz, the only daughter of the Fulputz family, the ruling family of Kasserdik. As soon as she noticed Eren, she gave him a polite smile and apologized for interrupting their conversation. Eren, recognizing her immediately, knelt down in greeting and introduced himself properly. Vivian seemed pleased by his manners and with a light-hearted chuckle, mentioned the rumors about him being in trouble because of her undergarments. She even apologized for it, explaining that it was only because her father had made a fuss over the situation. However, Eren was lost in thoughts, wondering why Lady Vivian was being escorted by a knight from Bolt Fortress. Vivian, oblivious to his curiosity, took Ben with her, saying they would be on their way so as not to disrupt his training. She encouraged Eren to continue working hard for the security of Kasserdik Fortress before departing. Even as they left, Eren couldn't shake off his suspicion, questioning if Ben was really just a guard. He was almost certain that he was a knight. Something about the situation felt off, but then again, it wasn't his place to pry into someone else's business. The next day, an unexpected event took place where Eren found himself standing in front of the gates of Kasserdik's inner fortress. Prior to that moment, upon seeing him, Manuel had immediately erupted in frustration. His face turned red as he scolded Eren for not paying attention to his advice about being selective with his targets. He demanded to know why Eren had gone out of his way to beat up a group of mercenaries who were actually hired by the inner fortress. Fuming, Manuel told him to deal with the mess he had created on his own. And so Eren ended up standing in front of the official administrative office, wondering how those thugs he had fought could possibly be recognized as mercenaries by the fortress. Just as he prepared himself to face the administrative officer and was about to knock on the door, a high-pitched and commanding voice ordered him to come in. Inside, the officer in charge, Nova sat at her desk, her eyes narrowed with irritation. As soon as Eren stepped in, she wasted no time in questioning him what kind of guard captain was he for causing trouble all the time. Her frustration was evident as she suggested that if he found his job so unsuitable, he should quit immediately instead of making things harder for everyone else. Eren hesitated as he had expected this from the best officer that has a babbling spirit. However, Eren came prepared to handle Nova's hostility. Right that instant, Cal's face flashed into Eren's mind, recalling him as special instructor who had taught him how to win a woman's favor. First on the list was to make sure to keep a soft smile around always, followed by giving sweet and specific compliments to the woman. Keeping that in mind, Eren's lips curled into an unusual smile, and with a bizarre expression on his face, he gave an odd compliment to her, remarking that her plump hair resembled perfectly ripened orange, and that it made him want to taste it. Nova's frustration reached its peak as she wondered if Eren had gone completely insane. She took a deep sigh when she decided to just let it go, as dealing with him would just give her a headache. Following their heated discussion, Nova explained that the mercenaries Eren had beaten up were actually meant to be sent to Bolt Fortress. Eren simply shrugged, stating that they were no better than piles of dung. Even if they had gone to Bolt Fortress, they wouldn't have done their jobs properly. Nova snapped at him to shut up. Then in a serious tone, she informed him that because of his actions, he would now have to take responsibility and fill in for those mercenaries himself. There was no room for negotiation. She assured him that he would be compensated, but this was his mess to clean up. Eren complied without resistance, though he still wasn't sure what exactly he was getting himself into. By the evening of the following day, troops and carriages moved through the forest, navigating the rugged mountain paths. That was when Aaron realized that it was a carriage escort mission. However, something about the whole situation felt off, as there were far too many people for a simple escort mission. Most of the other escorts were mercenaries, and they seemed to be preparing for a potential battle rather than a routine transport. Suspicion grew in Aaron's mind, and as he turned to ask the carriage driver about their destination, he was startled to find Dylan standing right beside him. Instinctively, Aaron frowned and called him a weasel. Dylan was also stunned by Aaron's presence, as he asked why that monster was there. In response to Aaron's comment, Dylan protested and stated that he was physically more stronger than him, to which Aaron responded that all of Dylan's friends were still on the brink of death, questioning in a defensive tone if he got hit less than the others. Immediately, Dylan apologized and said that Aaron was allowed to call him a weasel. As the group continued moving, one of the escorts noted that the sun had already set. He asked whether they would be camping for the night. Another mercenary responded, saying they would be staying in a small village nearby. Aaron frowned as soon as he heard that, because he knew if they were heading to a village on the outskirts of Kasserdik, then it could only be Knockville Village. As the conversation proceeded further, the member realized that the entire village was completely empty, further wondering if everyone in the village ran away together. People started guessing if the reason was bad harvest year or the work of demons. Just then, one of them immediately shushed them up. Right that instant, Dylan saw Aaron taking a narrower and quiet road and immediately decided to join him. At that moment, a woman came into view, peering outside with a twisted grin directed at them. As Aaron and Dylan strolled through the alley, Dylan inquired where was he intended to go as soon as they entered that small village. He then showered Aaron with more questions, inquiring about the mysterious disappearance of all the villagers. For a brief moment, a memory flashed through Aaron's mind. A young boy from Knockville, smiling brightly, had once thanked him for giving him a book. He had even asked Aaron to visit him if he ever returned to the village. Back in the present, Dylan suddenly stumbled, his foot landing in a thick pool of something. It was blood. He recoiled in shock, but before he could look up, Aaron's voice came firm and steady, commanding him to not look up. Dylan hesitated, but curiosity got the better of him. As soon as he lifted his gaze, his face went pale when he found the corpses of humans being hanged on large wooden poles. Terrified by that horrific scene, Dylan immediately threw up. Just then, a mysterious voice of a woman called them from behind, questioning what was the guard captain of Kasserdik Fortress doing there. Upon turning around, Aaron was taken aback to see Lady Vivian standing there with a sly smile, and he asked her what had brought her to the scene. Upon nightfall, the group formed a queue to receive their share of meat stew, expressing amazement at the generous portion of meat, with one of them even joking that he would have deserted if the food had been terrible. Watching them, Dylan remarked that those mercenaries seemed far too laid back, able to eat so casually after witnessing such a horrific sight, further wondering what kind of cruel-hearted person could have done such a thing. Just then, another man casually approached them and without hesitation stated that it was a sacrifice where humans were offered to demons, his tone as if such a thing were ordinary. He sat down beside them, holding out a bottle of wine, offering it since they had not yet eaten. But Aaron refused without hesitation, stating that wine dulled his senses, while Dylan, on the other hand, happily accepted, claiming that he never turned down a drink, only for Aaron to warn him with a sharp glare that if he threw up again, he would personally beat him up. The man introduced himself as John, the commander of the convoy, further mentioning that he had not seen their faces before and asking if they were mercenaries, to which Aaron simply introduced himself and explained that he was merely a part-timer, not a mercenary. John simply nodded and advised them to eat and rest well, as the journey ahead might prove to be far more difficult than they expected. At that moment, the group's attention was drawn to Vivian, the daughter of the royal family, who was traveling with them, her presence standing out even in the dim light of the campfire. Upon seeing her, Dylan commented that she was known as the Flower of the East and was just as breathtakingly beautiful as the rumors claimed, while John sighed and admitted that he had already suspected this was not just an ordinary escort mission, but had not expected Lady Vivian and her knight to be in that carriage. As Aaron's gaze remained on Vivian, his mind drifted back to their earlier encounter, when he and Dylan had stumbled upon the corpses, and upon seeing her, he had immediately asked why she was there, to which she had nonchalantly responded that she was merely out for a little outing, explaining that staying inside the castle all the time was suffocating. So she was heading to Bolt Fortress on her father's suggestion. Aaron had then asked if she was referring to the Lord, but before Vivian could respond, Ben had intervened, sternly warning them to stop, stating that knowing too much came with heavy responsibilities, and with a sly smirk, he had glared at Aaron and told him to be mindful of his position, advising him to only know what was appropriate for him. Aaron's thoughts returned to the present as he quietly contemplated the Lord's decision to send Vivian to Bolt Fortress, But before he could dwell on it further, John suddenly spoke, snapping him out of his thoughts as he remarked on Aaron's oddly calm state, questioning if he was not even the slightest bit scared, given that demons could appear at any moment. In response, Aaron firmly stated that there was a knight among them, and knights were trained solely to fight demons, serving as the Empire's elite force. He gripped his sword tightly and declared that as long as he possessed his sword, even the slimmest chance of survival would be enough for him to make it out alive. John stared at him in silence for a moment before finally wishing him luck. Later that night, as the rest of the camp remained at ease, Aaron quietly wandered away from the others and found himself pausing at the sight of something unexpected, a book, one that he instantly recognized as the very same book he had once gifted to the boy who had been on his mind earlier. As he knelt down and picked it up, he gazed at it in silence for a long moment before a faint smile crossed his lips as he murmured to himself that Horn must have grown taller by now. However, as he stood there lost in thought, a sudden noise from behind made him spin around instantly. He was met with a sight that left him extremely horrified, a corpse standing upright before him, its eyes fixated on him. The creature let out a deep groan before suddenly lunging forward, prompting Aaron to react on instinct, swiftly slashing his sword straight through its neck in a single clean motion. But even as the zombie fell, his mind raced as he tried to comprehend what had just happened, wondering where the zombie had come from. Before he could think any further, a sharp, terrified scream pierced through the night, and without hesitation, Aaron immediately turned in the direction of the sound, only to find Dylan swinging his sword in panic, struggling against another zombie that was lunging toward him. Without wasting another second, Aaron rushed forward and with a single precise strike, cut through the creature's neck with ease. As tears poured down Dylan's eyes, he cried, asking where on earth was Aaron going at that hour, leaving him behind. Aaron let out a sigh, telling him to stop freaking out before immediately asking where everyone else was, to which Dylan responded that they were completely screwed, further explaining that all the mercenaries and soldiers were in a deep sleep and would not wake up no matter what, as if they had been placed under some kind of powerful sleeping spell. Upon hearing that, Aaron's mind quickly began to piece things together, but something about the situation did not make sense, as if it were truly magic, then they should have been affected as well, yet they were completely fine. Just then, Aaron's mind suddenly became clear and he grasped the truth that someone has drugged the stew, and that the culprit's goal was to capture someone alive since it wasn't poison, but a sleeping agent. However, before he could process the situation any further, Dylan suddenly shouted in alarm and pointed toward the group of zombies that were steadily advancing toward them. Without hesitation, Aaron shoved Dylan aside, gripping his sword tightly as he muttered that he would use these slow-moving zombies as a warm-up before the real fight began. Unleashing his power, Aaron grinned and began his hunting spree. With swift and precise movements, Aaron's sword tore through the air as he cut down the undead one after another without pause, all the while declaring that this was the army's wake-up call as he pressed forward with his eyes blazing with anger. Shortly after, as the night stretched on, Aaron found himself standing amidst the pouring rain, surrounded by a huge pile of lifeless corpses. However, before he could lower his sword, another figure suddenly proceeded towards him, and at first he thought it was just another zombie, until his body went rigid when he saw Horn in front of him. The boy he had once gifted a book to, the one he had thought of earlier, was now standing before him, his once lively eyes now lifeless, his body turned into nothing more than a walking corpse. For a moment, Aaron was left speechless. Then after a long silence, all he could do was mutter to himself that Horn had indeed grown slightly taller, just as he had expected. And with that, without a hint of hesitation, Aaron swung his sword. 2 years prior, Aaron had taken refuge in a secluded village to escape from his pursuers. It was there that he met Horn, and they quickly formed a bond. Horn had discovered Aaron's hiding spot in the forest and had since become his closest companion. The son of a village farmer, Horn was a cheerful boy who loved books. He used to call Aaron Mr. Knight, and whenever asked why, he would always say that in books, knights were always the coolest and strongest, just like Aaron. In response, Aaron would teasingly pat his head, which never failed to annoy him. Aaron had grown so fond of him that even after settling in Kassertic Fortress, he still visited him frequently. But now the corpse of Horn stood before him in the form of a zombie, and the bright, cheerful face he once knew had turned dull and lifeless. Another memory surfaced, one where Aaron had told Horn about the Grand Library in the city, a place overflowing with books where the librarians were practically buried between them all the time. Horn had been amazed by the idea and had eagerly stated that he wanted to become a librarian. Aaron had laughed and told him it would be the perfect job for a bookworm like him. There was a saying that demons fed on human fear, but the truth was far more sinister. Demons devoured human despair. One time, Horn had come to Aaron, battered and bruised, and when asked what had happened, he revealed that he had been beaten by his father. His crime was daring to tell his father about his dream of becoming a librarian. His father, bound by tradition, had wanted him to follow in his footsteps and become a farmer just like him, believing it was the only path suitable, given their status. Returning to the present, Eren raised his sword but hesitated as he looked at Horn. Instead of striking, he lowered his blade and rushed forward, embracing him tightly. In that moment, Eren held him close and confessed that he was not a knight, but just a mere fortress guard captain. Suddenly, Dylan arrived with the others and informed Eren that he had woken all the men who had been sleeping earlier. With a sharp command, Dylan ordered everyone to attack and wipe out the remaining zombies. However, Eren gently laid Horn's corpse down, placed his hand firmly over his face, and as a final act of mourning whispered rest in peace, hoping that whatever awaited Horn beyond death would be kinder than the world he had left behind. Just then, an explosion erupted from the building where Lady Vivian was staying. Without a moment's hesitation, Eren grabbed his sword and rushed toward the building, vowing to avenge Horn. Inside the ruined structure, Ben lay injured and bruised. He muttered that they had been traveling secretly to Bolt Fortress due to rumors that someone was targeting Vivian at Casterdic Fortress. However, that rumor had turned out to be true. He hadn't expected the enemy to go as far as attacking a hidden procession, yet here they were. Summoning his remaining strength, Ben pointed his sword toward the figure standing before him and remarked that wielding a sword to protect a lady was the true joy and romance of a knight, even if the opponent was a wicked demon. The demon's posture radiated a sense of carefreeness as he sat in front of him. His human-like body was flawed by a disturbing mutation on one arm, which had grown abnormally large and was adorned with numerous unsettling eyes. With a confident grin, Ben asked the demon to step back, further calling him disgusting. With a cunning smile spread across his face, the demon inquired if yapping was one of Ben's specialty, further disclosing that even if he tried to buy some time with his nonsense, his wounds wouldn't heal quickly as the dagger was coated with a vicious poison. Besides, Eren might have eaten the stew as well, so his vision must be more foggy. In a mocking manner, the demon inquired if Ben, though he had a chance. However, Ben didn't step back and taunted him that his actions were just as vile to him, blaming his ugly appearance. That remark caused the demon's expression to darken with anger, and he cursed Ben, warning him to be careful with his words. In a blur of movement, the demon lunged at him with terrifying speed. Ben reacted quickly, his instincts taking over as he dodged the attack, causing the demon to crash into the ground. Upon witnessing his incredible power, Ben wondered if the demon was using only about half of his full strength, as Ben's aura was barely noticeably. Despite his mutated arm, the rest of his body remained largely untouched by demonic erosion. As the demon attacked again, Ben swiftly ducked and formulated a strategy. He needed to target the areas of the demon's body that hadn't undergone demonic transformation. If he could provoke the creature into making a reckless move, he might have a chance. Acting on this plan, he thrust his sword deep into the demon's left shoulder, hoping to win the battle. However, the demon moved with shocking speed, catching Ben by the neck with his massive hand. With a mocking tone, he asked if Ben truly believed that stabbing an untransformed part of his body would be enough to kill him. His grip tightened as he taunted him further, questioning whether he thought a mere knight like him could bring down a demon. Struggling for breath, Ben stood frozen in place as Eren suddenly appeared behind the demon, attacking him with a fierce determination. His voice was filled with fury, as he declared that he would avenge Horn before swinging his blade with lethal precision. As Eren's sword struck, severing the demon's head apart, the creature let out a fiery scream of pain. The demon fought back, launching a fierce attack that sent Eren crashing to the ground, further demanding to know his identity. The demon's pain was obvious, his screams echoing through the air as his head was cracked open. Unable to comprehend what on earth actually happened, the demon's fury burned hot as he ended up wasting a lot of blood by the hands of a man who wasn't even a knight. Before he ran out of the blood offered as a sacrifice, he needed Vivian, who, despite all the commotion, remained sound asleep. However, before the demon could make a move, Eren pushed himself back to his feet and launched another fierce attack. His voice rang out as he declared this was revenge for Horn, who had been cruelly turned into a zombie. His sword struck true once again, cutting deep into the demon's flesh. With pure determination, Eren vowed that no matter how many times the demon recovered, he would keep cutting him down. The demon's screams pierced the air as he cursed Eren for inflicting such heavy damage upon him. His condition worsened rapidly as the demon continued to suck all the blood out of the host, and it was clear that he would be consumed completely. Eren spat blood onto the ground, smirking as he mocked the demon. He had expected the creature to endure a few hits, but in the end, he was nothing more than a weakling. Enraged, the demon's fury grew. But Eren, driven by vengeance for Horn, advanced once more to deliver another lethal blow. Before he could strike, the demon caught Eren's sword with his mutated hand. Grating his teeth, he demanded to know what was his relationship with Horn for him to go that far. As the demon struggled to match Eren's relentless strength, he found himself questioning how this man, who wasn't even a knight, possessed such overwhelming power. Just then, Aaron's instincts kicked in, as a sudden presence behind him made him react instantly, blocking a surprise attack. His eyes narrowed as he met the gaze of none other than John. John, having witnessed Aaron's strength, commented that not only did he seem big, but he also possessed remarkable strength. Unfazed, Aaron smirked, stating that he had been wondering when John would finally crawl out of hiding. Amazed by Aaron's sharp mind, he stated that Aaron looked like a bear, but inside he possessed the mind of a sly fox. In response, Aaron pointed out that since the villagers had been sacrificed and John had shown up at the perfect moment, it was only natural to suspect him as the mastermind behind it all. John sighed in frustration, admitting that if Aaron hadn't interfered, everything would have already been over. Meanwhile, the injured host of the demon saw his chance to slip away unnoticed and recover. However, before he could escape, the demon's deep voice rumbled within him, declaring that it was already too late and that his body was no longer needed. Panic surged through the host as he begged to spare his life, promising to offer more blood in exchange for his life. But the demon did not listen, as it had already found a far more suitable and delicious vessel. Back at the duel, Aaron and John clashed fiercely. In that moment, John's sword shattered Aaron's blade, leaving him defenseless. Aaron clicked his tongue in irritation, blaming his weapon's cheap quality. He wondered if it dulled during the earlier battle with the demon. Just then, John seized the opportunity, lunging at Aaron and declaring that it was all over. But Aaron was not one to back down so easily. Just as John closed in, Aaron delivered a powerful punch to his face, sending him crashing to the ground. As John struggled to regain his footing, he couldn't help but wonder that Aaron was not the kind of guy he could defeat easily. Before Aaron could catch his breath, an even greater threat emerged. The real demon had finally taken its true form. The demon stood tall and threatening, its intimidating size matched by its unsettling appearance, with thick and muscular arms. Its face was featureless and was devoid of eyes. Instead, a singular large eye was positioned in the middle of its chest. Clueless, Aaron inquired if that man got completely devoured by the demon. The demon displayed its teeth in a menacing grin and declared that it would claim him from now on, further questioning what actions he intended to take. In a mocking tone, it further said that Aaron didn't even have the strength to swing his sword, and that he was not even a knight, inquiring what could he possibly do. Aaron's anger boiled over as he dropped his sword and lunged at the demon. He bit into its flesh and his teeth sank deep into its skin. He stated that he still had the strength to tear those disgusting huge eyes apart. The demon screamed in pain, but as Aaron continued to tear into its flesh, the demon's cries turned into laughter as he was impressed by his unwavering determination. Suddenly, Aaron's mind was flooded with memories of his past, where he saw a small event involving his former comrades from his mercenary days. He was confused and disoriented, wondering how he had been transported back in time. Among the memories, he saw his teammate Gladiator Golgai, who had always pushed the blame onto Gambler Wei for taking his money. He also remembered Avery, a mage who had always found humor in their petty arguments. And then there was the woman, the one he could never forget, the woman who haunted his nightmares. Among the memories, Aaron saw his commander severely injured with blades embedded in his back. His commander reminded him to survive at all cost. However, the next moment, Aaron found himself amidst the lifeless bodies of his comrades and commander. As he slept, lost in memories of his past, the demon found him truly amazing and delicious. Instantly, Aaron regained consciousness and was immediately greeted by Ben beside him. Ben inquired if Aaron had come to his senses, but Aaron could only whisper in disbelief that Ben was still alive. Ben let out a chuckle and replied that it should be his line, as he had thought Aaron was already dead since his presence had been getting weaker each time. Aaron immediately inspected his body, expecting injuries, but to his surprise, he was completely fine. Confusion clouded his mind as he struggled to recall what had happened. Ben explained that when he woke up, he had found Aaron unconscious, but next to him lay the host of the demon, his body lifeless, as if all his blood and life had been drained from him. Ben gave Aaron a sharp glance and asked if it was his doing. Aaron hesitated before apologizing, stating that he didn't remember anything at all, but it didn't matter as long as the demon was dead. Changing the subject, he then questioned the connection between that reckless young lady, Vivian, and the demons. She hadn't even seemed aware that her life was in danger, instead sleeping comfortably in her bed as chaos unfolded around her. Ben, in a playful manner, mentioned that it wasn't his business to worry about. Aaron, seeing no point in arguing, dropped the subject. Ben then took a more serious tone and expressed his deep gratitude, stating that they were truly indebted to Aaron for his help. Finally, he introduced himself properly as a knight from Bolt Fortress, and once again thanked Aaron for his generosity. As the sun rose, the troops began the task of gathering the corpses of the villagers and placing them, one by one, into a massive pit of fire. Among the bodies was Horn, still clutching his book. It gave off an unusual smell, and Aaron couldn't help but wonder whether they really had sacrificed an entire village just to summon a demon and take Lady Cassardic's life. Once the bodies were cremated, the procession turned back toward Cassardic. Aaron and Ben silently agreed that Ben would take credit for killing the demon since it was just the two of them who saw it. Moreover, it was more convenient that way because if word got out that Aaron had come into contact with the demon, the situation could escalate and the church might launch an investigation. He had survived this ordeal and would likely receive compensation as well, making it a win-win situation for him. As he strolled with the group, Dylan appeared out of nowhere beside him and grasped an arm, inquiring with a goofy grin why he was walking so quickly. Staring at him, Aaron thought that Dylan had also died, but that was not the case as he survived by hiding under a pile of bodies. Dylan was more persistent than he had anticipated, but instead of responding, Aaron simply pushed him away. For a moment, Aaron thought his troubles had ended with the mercenary job, but it was not the case, because the next morning he woke up in sheer terror. As he gazed into the mirror, he could hardly believe what he saw. On the left side of his chest, an unsettling eye had sprouted, making his entire body rigid. Before he could react, a voice, low and unfamiliar, whispered from the eye, asking how he had been doing. Astonished, Aaron let out a screech before grabbing his dagger and pointing it at the eye. Unbothered by the threat, the eye spoke in a mocking tone, saying that it was quite refreshing and even requesting that Aaron aim the knife a little higher. Aaron let out another piercing scream, demanding that the voice shut up before attempting to stab the eye. As he screamed again, Henna heard his voice echoing from upstairs. Aaron lay defeated on the bed when he questioned if it was the demon from their previous meeting. It gave an unusual and a goofy response that the ignorant ones calls it a demon. Aaron frowned in disbelief and wondered if it latched onto him the moment he bit it off, further thinking if that was also the reason he lost his memories. The voice calmly explained that it hadn't been Aaron's choice in the first place. Instead, the demon had taken over his body of its own will. Aaron ordered it to leave and find another host, threatening to skin the flesh around it if necessary. The demon merely laughed, explaining that moving to another host took time, somewhere around 100 years. Upon hearing that, Aaron was left speechless. He immediately pointed the dagger at the eye again, but the demon reassured him that its presence wasn't entirely bad. It insisted that it was necessary to show him its divine powers. As the demon began to demonstrate its power, a brilliant aura surrounded the dagger in Aaron's hand, filling the room with radiance. Aaron's eyes widened in shock as he wondered how did a demon possess a power that only knights wielded? However, after injecting the sword with its power, the demon was left exhausted. It asked Aaron if he had seen the potential in its power, but its energy had been drained so much that it immediately lost his consciousness. Aaron was left with disappointment when he realized that the demon was a complete weakling. Just then, Henna screeched and called for Aaron, prompting him to conceal his chest from the blanket, as he knew that he would be screwed if Henna encounters this. On the other hand, Henna called for Aaron because the Catholic monetary was looking for him. As Henna called for Aaron, a Catholic monetary named Jace abruptly pushed her aside and impatiently inquired if Aaron was on the second floor. Without waiting for an answer, he began marching upstairs, grumbling that he had no time to waste. Jace howled Aaron's name, calling him a commoner, and arrogantly stated that he was in no position to hesitate when summoned by nobles. He then informed Aaron that Ben was looking for him. Jace continued striding towards Aaron's room, but before he could say anything further, the door suddenly swung open. In an instant, Aaron landed a solid punch straight to his face, sending him crumpling to the ground. With a smirk spreading across his face, Aaron mockingly remarked that Jace still had that ugly look, further taunting him by calling him halfy. He then told him to stay down and rest for a bit while he got ready. A while later, Aaron came downstairs with Jace. On the way, they encountered Henna, who, in a tempting manner, suggested that Aaron return home early. She claimed that she had recently learned a massage technique that would make him feel good, adding that she would do it for only 50 copper. Aaron ignored her completely and kept walking. Determined, Henna quickly lowered the price to 40 copper, but he still didn't pay her any attention as he left the premises, dragging Jace behind him. As they walked down the streets, Aaron found himself sighing in relief. He had been terrified, but it turned out Ben had simply been calling for him. His mood instantly lightened and he smirked, wondering whether Ben was about to reward him for taking down the demon. Back at Knockville Village after the demon's defeat, Ben had informed him about the glorious achievement of defeating a demon and insisted that Aaron allow him to take credit for it. Aaron had immediately agreed without hesitation, mentioning that he didn't want any unnecessary attention. He had even asked if Ben planned to share some of the rewards with him, if he felt that bad about taking all the credit. Ben had laughed and promised that if he ever received a reward, he would be sure to call Aaron over. Returning to the present, Aaron pondered the strange occurrence from earlier. The power to destroy evil and enforce justice, known as aura, was a miraculous ability granted only to knights. Only those handpicked and trained by the Empire were allowed to wield it, yet the method of their training was left unwritten. That was all Aaron knew about knights and their aura. However, something about the demon's power still unsettled him, because it felt similar to aura. Raking his thoughts, Aaron turned to Jace and asked how much farther they had to travel to meet Ben. Jace, still irritated, replied that they were almost there. However, he turned to Aaron and inquired about the word halfie, demanding to know its meaning. With a taunting grin, Aaron explained that it meant half of a half-noble, further elaborating that it was the perfect nickname for him, the bastard of a noble's bastard. Jace's anger boiled over instantly as he vowed that one of these days he would kill Aaron. Nevertheless, Aaron's smirk immediately faded when he caught sight of the Solar Church Hall standing before him. The deep unease settled over him as he had a demon inside him at that very moment. As soon as they entered, Ben greeted them with a confident smile, stating that he had been waiting for Aaron. He remarked that Aaron seemed startled by the sudden summons, though he was completely unaware that Aaron's real fear was being exercised on the spot. Meanwhile, the demon whispered irritably in Aaron's mind, complaining that the church was putting it in a foul mood. Just then, Ben introduced him to Priest Blyan and Inquisitor Jonah. Jonah seemed like a quite formidable and a strong lady, and her footsteps seemed to shake the ground with confidence. Ben informed him that both Blyan and Joanna were renowned for their deep religious faith. As Joanna approached Aaron, he wondered why she was staring at him so intently, only to be baffled by her sudden attack towards him. Instinctively, his hand moved to his sword, preparing to counter, only for Joanna to lightly bump her fist against his forehead, leaving him utterly confused. Blyan let out a hearty laugh, explaining that the Inquisitor had extended her hand of blessing. He even admitted that he was jealous of Aaron for receiving such an honor. Of course, Aaron had no way of realizing that this was just some kind of religious ritual. However, the demon wasn't thrilled because of that blessing. Instead, it questioned how dare a god's underling place their dirty hand on it. Blyan then revealed that Ben had told them everything about how Aaron had refused to take credit despite defeating the demon. In recognition, they had decided to present him with a golden brooch from the church, a token of gratitude for his contributions. Aaron's eyes widened in disbelief. He could hardly believe they were handing him such a valuable item. He hesitantly asked if it was really all right for him to accept it. Blyan reassured him, stating that all they asked in return was for Aaron to lend them his strength if the church ever found itself in dire need, though such an event would be extremely rare. Aaron studied Blyan for a brief moment and thought that he was one of the corrupt power brokers behind Kasserdik. In fact, he was a true religious person of that era. Without hesitation, Aaron raised his hand and agreed to the demand, dramatically declaring Blyan to be his father of faith. Overcome with joy, he loudly praised the Solar Church with exaggerated enthusiasm, while Jonah simply watched him with a quiet, observant gaze. Sometime later, Aaron ran into Kale, who was immediately taken aback by his appearance. His eyes narrowed as he asked if Aaron had bullied someone and stolen their belongings, pointing at the golden brooch and the gleaming armor. Aaron smirked and scoffed, telling Kale to take off that tacky flower-patterned scarf before making any comments. In a defensive tone, Kale demanding to know what was wrong with his scarf. Aaron then explained that the brooch was a gift infused with the energy of the sun god, and the armor had been crafted with sacred gold coins. Kale inquired why Aaron didn't use all that wealth to pay off his bar bills instead. Just then, a stunning barmaid approached carrying 2 glasses of beer. Kale grinned and thanked Charlotte, who then asked Brig wouldn't be coming that day. Aaron casually replied that Brig was off duty. Kale tilted his head and smirked, teasingly asking if she was interested in Brig. Charlotte smiled and admitted that it was rare to find a hardworking and caring man like him around there. She then added that she was planning to give Brig a massage that would make him feel really good. Aaron immediately thought of Henna and realized with amusement that she must have stolen that line from Charlotte. Taking a sip of his beer, Aaron frowned. It was too warm. He craved a freshly poured, ice-cold drink instead. Before he could complain, Charlotte casually mentioned a group of scammers that had recently appeared in town. With so many outsiders staying in Kasserdik lately, gambling had naturally begun to thrive at the Sick Mermaid Inn in District 5. She explained that an unusual phenomenon had been occurring there, that a little girl had been dominating the dice rolls. At that very moment, Dylan was also gambling at the Sick Mermaid Inn. Unfortunately for him, he kept losing every single bet to a young mage girl known as Kanna. She had won 6 times in a row against him, leaving him both bewildered and suspicious of a scam. Aaron slammed his beer glass down and stood up abruptly, exclaiming that a minor had dared to gamble in his district. As the captain of the guards at Kasserdik Fortress, he declared that he couldn't just sit back and watch this unfold. As he prepared to storm over to the Sick Mermaid Inn, Kale panicked and tried to stop him, fearing that Aaron would cause a scene. Aaron, however, was already far too eager to eliminate their gambling, to which Kale responded that it was all just Aaron's will. Subsequently, Aaron reached the place and slammed the door open, startling the owner of the bar. Completely thrilled at the sight of gambling before him, he greeted the owner, Joseph, and immediately inquired about the location of the gambling table. Disoriented, Joseph questioned if he had not yet quit gambling. Aaron responded that he was just going to play 1 round and leave since he had a lot of cash for the first time in a while. He swiftly moved to the table in front of Kanna, mentioning that he could smell money from it. Additionally, he brought up the rumors about Kana being quite skilled with the dice and immediately challenged her to witness her abilities. The dice game involved shaking 2 dice in a cup, and when the numbers were added together, the person with the highest last digit would win. As the game progressed, both Aaron and Kana became engrossed. When Aaron shook his cup and lifted it, he discovered that the dice showed 6, matching Kana's roll, resulting in another tie. Determined, he decided to raise the stakes, choosing to go all in with double or nothing. Kana followed suit, thinking Aaron was foolish. She had intentionally lost a few rounds to lure him into arrogance, and now he was carelessly throwing his money away. Just then, a man beside Kana let out a single cough, signaling the start of their scheme. She knew there was nothing Aaron could do. There was no way he could even imagine that she could manipulate the dice at will using magic. Though she felt a little sorry for him, she had no choice but to take every last coin he had. The moment she employed her magic to alter the dice within the cup, Aaron promptly ordered her to stop, demanding to know if she was trying to cheat using magic. His accusation left her stunned. She immediately defended herself, asking if he had any proof. Aaron confidently asserted that he did, explaining that she was about to make him roll a 4 while ensuring that her dice also landed on 4 to end the game. Taken aback, Hannah hesitated before lifting her cup, revealing the dice. They showed a 4. Aaron smirked, remarking that she had been crafting an entire scenario in her head. He then revealed his own dice, which also showed a 4. Without hesitation, he bet all his money and even his hand on the fact that she had used magic. He further mentioned that it was quite common for a scam like this to be built around a young mage, forming a filthy gambling ring. The men behind Kana smirked, realizing that Aaron had seen through them all along. Without hesitation, they unsheathed their swords and threatened him, demanding that he drop all his money and leave if he didn't want to die. Maintaining a stern expression, Aaron gathered all his money and placed it inside his bag. He warned them that if anyone knew his true identity, they wouldn't dare engage in such a deceitful game. With a grin, he added that he had enjoyed playing with Kana and wanted to go for one more round, betting a gold coin. He informed them that it was real gold from the Solar Church and carried the same value as 500,000 copper. The thugs' jaws dropped upon seeing the coin, as it was their first time witnessing one from the Solar Church. Just then, one of the scammers intervened, questioning what Aaron was trying to pull and why he was willing to play again even after discovering their true identities. However, in a mocking tone, Aaron asked why the world's biggest gambling ring scammers talked so much, wondering if they were scared of him. Angered by his mockery, one of the thugs glared at him and placed all of his money on the bet along with Kana's hand. He threatened her, declaring that if she failed, she would lose her hand. Petrified, Kana nodded and began shaking the cup. On the spur of the moment, Aaron suggested that Kana should have gone to a magic academy instead of getting involved in a gambling scam. He then questioned why she was mixed up with those thugs. He showered her with a series of questions, asking if magic had stopped suiting her once she learned it or if she was struggling financially and trying to earn money for Magic Academy. Annoyed, Kana snapped at him, telling him not to assume her situation when he had no idea about anything. Judging from her reaction, Aaron knew he had struck a nerve. Meanwhile, one of the thugs wondered where Aaron was getting all his confidence, though it seemed like he was just stalling for time. Since Aaron had discovered their true identities, they had no intention of letting him leave alive. Out of the blue, Aaron asked Kana if she was capable of making a beer cold with her magic. His sudden question caught everyone off guard, including Kana. Confused, she hesitated before confidently stating that she could do it with ice magic. She then asked why he would bring up such a ridiculous question in the middle of a game. Upon hearing her answer, Aaron's eyes glowed with excitement and a grin spread across his face. Without another word, he tossed his dice onto the table. The moment he did, the thugs lunged at him with their swords drawn, but Aaron dodged their attacks with ease and delivered a series of swift, powerful blows. The dice game was also known as the Warrior's Bet, and there was an old saying that a person favored by Moon would never lose. Aaron proved that true as he took down each thug one by one. Just then, another man charged at him from behind, swinging an axe in a surprise attack. But before the weapon could strike, Aaron caught the axe mid-air, leaving the attacker stunned. With a cold glare, Aaron asked if they felt no shame using and exploiting a young girl. His grip tightened around the thug's neck as he lifted him off the ground. Scolding him for his actions, he stated they should be ashamed of themselves. The thug let out a soul-crushing scream as Aaron snapped his neck. Another thug, fueled by dark magic, attempted to stab Aaron from behind with a dagger. Amused by his recklessness, Aaron smirked and asked if he wanted to join his friends in death. At the last moment, Aaron sidestepped, causing the thug to stab his own ally in the chest instead. Before he could react, Aaron seized his head and crushed it effortlessly. Kana watched in stunned silence, unable to believe that Aaron had defeated all of them with his bare hands. From the sidelines, Kale sighed, commenting that Aaron always ended up in a fight whenever he played dice. That was exactly why he had been banned from gambling. As Kale inspected one of the unconscious thugs, he recognized him immediately. It was knife-wielding Shaq, a wanted assassin from the neighboring town. Afterward, Aaron called out to Kana, referring to her as Fridge Kid. He found her hiding behind a pillar, trembling with fear. Tears welled up in her eyes as she begged for her life, pleading with him not to kill her. Instead of harming her, Aaron walked up to her and made an offer. He asked if she wanted to earn money in exchange for making him a cold glass of beer every day. He then promised to introduce her to a job that would guarantee her a place to stay until she was able to enter a magic academy. With a warm smile, he extended his hand and asked if she wanted to come with him. Kana hesitated for only a moment before gladly agreeing. On a refreshing day, Aaron was training with his sword when Kana approached him carrying a fresh, cold glass of beer. Upon seeing her, he affectionately called her Mini Fridge and took a large sip, savoring the refreshment. The icy drink hit the spot, making him sigh in satisfaction. He then patted her head and casually asked how old she was. Kana responded that she was 12, prompting Aaron to smirk and tease her about being too small for her age. Just then, Henna walked in and with a serious expression, asked if Kana was his daughter. Caught off guard, Aaron nearly choked on his beer as he spittled the beer out and quickly denied the accusation. He explained that she was just a mage he had picked up from the streets. Since Henna was short on staff at the inn, he suggested she think of Kana as a new employee. Henna glanced at Mini Fridge for a split second before suddenly pulling her into a tight hug, leaving Kana completely bewildered. With a warm smile, Henna declared that there was no way such a cute kid could be Aaron's daughter. She then reassured Kana that she must have gone through a rough time because of selfish adults, but she would protect her no matter what. When Henna asked for her name, Kana stuttered slightly before answering. However, the moment she did, Henna's expression darkened slightly, a mischievous grin forming on her lips. Leaning in close, she asked just how many cold glasses of beer Kana could make per day. Then, in a stern tone, she proposed that if Kana could manage 300, she would double her pay. Aaron, amused by the situation, left them to it and headed off to work. Aaron's daily routine as a guard captain followed a familiar pattern. First, he greeted his boss, Manuel, who always looked exhausted and hopeless. As usual, Manuel gave him the same warning, not to beat people up. Second, Aaron patrolled the market, ensuring order within the fortress, while helping himself to free apples from a vendor, a small reward for keeping the area free of thugs, although the vendors weren't pleased. Finally, he conducted entrance inspections at the fortress gates, ensuring everything was in order before wrapping up his duties as a guard captain. As Aaron stood at the entrance gate of Castardic's fortress, he scanned the road ahead. The lack of visitors made him wonder if the rumors about their expensive entrance fee had spread too far. Just as he was about to dismiss the thought, a buzz-cut man suddenly appeared and, in a hushed tone, chanted, "Carnelian flowers never wither." Aaron immediately recognized him and let out a sigh. Without hesitation, he asked if he had been sent by Scar again. The man shushed him hurriedly, lowering his voice as he warned Aaron not to say that name so carelessly. He reminded him that Scar was the shadow of Castardic Fortress. Aaron, however, remained unimpressed. Crossing his arms, he casually asked why the man had come. After quickly glancing around to ensure no one was listening, a man handed Aaron a transcript, explaining that a large number of outsiders had been entering Castardic lately, and some of them, claiming to be merchants, were acting suspiciously. Aaron unfolded the letter and read it. It stated that it had been 3 days since they had entered the fortress, and rather than leaving, they were lying low, trying to conceal their presence. The letter ended with a bold claim that no infiltrator could ever escape the eyes of the King of Shadows, Scar. Unimpressed, Aaron crumpled the letter and tossed it aside, declaring that he was too busy for this kind of nonsense. Fixing the man with a sharp glare, he ordered him to return to Scar with a message that he had no time for his little games, leaving the man in tears. Meanwhile, Aaron thought to himself that an increase in outsiders visiting such a remote rural place could only benefit their economy, further questioning what could possibly go wrong. Just then, Aaron spotted a carriage approaching from a distance. Without wasting a second, he nudged Carter awake, grinning as he mentioned that it was time for them to make some money. As the carriage neared, Aaron raised a hand to stop it, only to find himself face to face with a man who looked extremely cunning. There was something about him that felt off, making Aaron wonder whether he should arrest him on the spot. Before he could make a decision, Carter stepped in and greeted the man with familiarity, calling him Dorno. Turning to Aaron, he introduced him properly, explaining that Dorno had transferred from the upper part of Mosark to the Castardic branch, and that he had seen him at a security checkpoint a few days ago. With a cheeky smile, Dorno greeted Aaron and casually remarked that, at first glance, he had mistaken him for a knight because of how handsome he looked. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out a pouch bulging with coins. The moment Aaron laid eyes on the money, his skepticism melted away, replaced by pure joy. The sight of the money transformed Aaron's anger into radiant joy, as he exclaimed that Dorno could call him brother from that moment on. He couldn't help but think that the man wasn't so bad after all. Just then, Carter nervously inquired if Dorno still had the thing he had given him last time. The moment Dorno handed him a bottle filled with small pills, Carter's face lit up with relief. He thanked him, mentioning that he always knocked out after taking one. Aaron, narrowing his eyes, immediately questioned if that was really the case. Startled, Carter immediately hid the bottle behind his back, pleading with Aaron not to take it away from him. However, Aaron simply reassured him that he wouldn't. Shifting back to business, Aaron reminded Dorno that they had to inspect everything that entered the fortress. He then asked if there was anything suspicious in the carriage. Dorno visibly tensed, stuttering as he insisted that there was nothing. He even added that if he had anything questionable, he would have offered a larger entrance fee. However, as Aaron stood behind him, his sharp eyes caught sight of an unusual tattoo at the nape of Dorno's neck. Before he could ask about it, Carter's sudden scream pierced the air, immediately drawing his attention. Carter gagged as he pointed toward the carriage, his face twisted in disgust. Alarmed, Aaron moved to inspect it, only to recoil at the sight before him. The carriage was filled with decaying goat carcasses. Their rotting bodies were covered in writhing maggots, blood pooling at the bottom and seeping into the wood, and the stench was unbearable. Frowning, Aaron demanded to know what Dorno planned to do with all those corpses. When Dorno's expression darkened into a sinister smirk, Aaron's suspicions aroused, but they quickly faded when Dorno handed him another pouch of coins. With a seemingly earnest expression, he explained that the butcher he usually traded with had died in an accident, leaving him no choice but to transport the carcasses in this state. As Aaron gratefully accepted the money, his wary expression relaxed into a smile, and he thought that he was genuinely a nice person. He immediately passed the carriage and welcomed him to the Casterdic fortress. However, the moment Dorno stepped into the fortress, his entire behavior shifted. His friendly smirk faded into a cold sneer as he muttered, calling them all fools. A hint of grudge flashed in his eyes as he whispered to himself that soon he would turn this place into a living hell. Meanwhile, as Aaron watched him leave, he casually turned to Carter and asked if Dorno liked high places. His mind wandered back to the man who had warned him about the intrusion of suspicious outsiders posing as merchants. A sleek grin spread across his face as he remarked that from now on, Dorno would have to be very careful. At the Laughing Rabbit Inn, Aaron, Vermin, and Briggs sat together, sharing a drink. Vermin let out a sigh of disappointment as he expressed his frustration that even Brig had received a date request from Charlotte. Brig, looking somewhat flustered, explained that she had invited him to watch an execution with her, making Aaron think that her actions were quite remarkable. Meanwhile, Vermin slumped forward, groaning about how unfair it was that even someone like Brig was going on a date. Aaron shook his head in disbelief and questioned whether Charlotte saw executions as some kind of cultural festival, further muttering about the uncivilized medieval bastards. Blushing slightly, Brig mentioned that he had planned to bring her a gift, his mother's homemade dish. His words left both Aaron and Vermin momentarily speechless. Vermin's expression darkened as he asked if Brig was seriously talking about that dog-shit fish bread his mother made. Brig recoiled at their reactions and demanded to know what was so wrong with his mother's cooking. He insisted that the fish bread was extremely popular in Brigden Kingdom, which happened to be his mother's homeland. Aaron looked at him doubtfully before questioning whether everyone in that kingdom had their sense of taste and smell completely ruined. Brig stared at him, dumbfounded. With a sigh, Aaron half-heartedly apologized but then bluntly stated that the fish bread was no different from dung baked in an oven. Brig let out a disappointed groan, calling Aaron mean. Before the conversation could continue, the buzz-cut man from earlier barged into the inn, just about to recite his group's sacred oath. Before he could finish even a single line, Aaron swiftly punched him in the face, cutting him off mid-sentence. Without hesitation, he grabbed the man by the collar and dragged him along as he left. He casually called out to Brig, wishing him the best of luck on his date with Charlotte. As Aaron strolled through the dimly lit alley, dragging the groaning man along, he was met by Scar, the self-proclaimed Shadow King of Casterdic Fortress. With an air of authority, Scar inquired if Aaron remembered their oath that Scar would rule the shadows while Aaron remained in the light, and together they would take over Casterdic. Ignoring him, Aaron fixed him with a deadly glare and bluntly asked if Scar had a death wish. Grabbing the so-called Shadow King by the head, he demanded to know if it was his hobby to summon people while they were eating just to spew nonsense. His gaze flickered to Scar's ridiculous hat. Unimpressed, he snatched it off and turned his attention to Scar's minions, noting that they were all dressed the same. With a mocking tone, he asked if they got the hats as a group deal, further questioning their matching varsity-style jackets. Scar protested, demanding his hat back, but Aaron simply frowned and asked whether they were not going to take their hats off. As the minions hesitantly removed their hats, they exchanged confused glances, unsure of what a varsity jacket even was. Aaron pinched Scar's ear, remarking that their so-called secret organization was nothing more than a bunch of town vigilantes. He suggested Scar quit his little role play before it became embarrassing. Scar, however, remained persistent. He pleaded with Aaron to at least hear him out. He referenced the letter he had sent earlier, explaining that something was off about the recent intrusion of outsiders in Kasserek. He noted that these people had been secretly gathering every night away from prying eyes. With an unusually serious tone, he warned that something big was about to happen and urged Eren to take caution. Eren yanked on Scar's ear sharply, advising him to stay out of it and leave such matters to the guards. As he prepared to walk away, he suddenly remembered something. Turning back, he informed Scar that he hadn't been visiting the woodworking shops lately, and that his father, Jackson, had been looking for him. The moment Scar heard his father's name, his entire behavior changed. He stiffened, immediately straightened himself, and muttered that they would meet again before bolting in the opposite direction. Watching him leave, Eren let out a sigh. Despite Scar's dramatic stunts, his warning lingered in Eren's mind as he mentioned that there was no harm in staying cautious. In a different corner of the city, Eren reunited with the executioner, Dallas, and his son, Ted, who welcomed him warmly. With excitement, Ted admired Eren's armor, calling it cool. Amused, Eren handed him an apple, and Dallas gestured for his son to say thank you. As Eren glanced around the household, he thought to himself that the place was as menacing as ever. Dallas gestured for Eren to take a seat, apologizing for always calling him over. He then brought up the prisoners set for execution, which were 6 members of Karzan's lone wolf, all of whom Eren had captured. Dallas expressed his amazement at Eren's strength, but Eren simply brushed it off, saying it just happened that way. Shifting the subject, Eren remarked that Ted had grown a lot since the last time he saw him. He then handed Dallas a pouch heavy with gold coins, explaining that Nova had instructed him to deliver it as an advance payment for the request. Since the Lord himself planned to attend the execution, he had requested Dallas to display his finest skills. Dallas nodded, assuring Eren that Nova had nothing to worry about. Additionally, he mentioned that he planned to bring Ted along as it was time for the boy to start preparing to take over the family business. Ted had reached that age and needed to start learning to take over his father's responsibilities, as there was a saying that the farmer's son grows to become a farmer, and similarly, the executioner's son needs to be an executioner too. With a heavy voice, Dallas mentioned that passing down a job that received ostracism from people always made his heart heavy, and that was also the reason his wife left him. However, Dallas expressed gratitude to Eren, saying that unlike everyone else, he treated them with respect. Eren responded that there was no reason not to, explaining that aside from that underwear thief, Hans, Dallas was the only person he could have a proper conversation with. At the mention of Hans, Dallas sighed and shook his head, lamenting that he never would have expected such a sincere man to turn into a criminal. Eren simply stated that anyone was capable of sin. Jokingly, Eren told Dallas not to hesitate to slice his throat if he ever became a criminal. Without hesitation, Dallas smirked and assured him that when the time came, he would perform his ultimate execution technique. To everyone's surprise, Ted suddenly chimed in, declaring with pride that if Eren ever turned to crime, he would be the one to cut his neck. Both men laughed at the boy's remark. Dallas then stood up and mentioned that he would see Eren at the execution grounds. Meanwhile, across town, a group of men gathered in a dark alley, discussing their operations. One of them expressed frustration over Scar's relentless surveillance, claiming it was making cover activities more difficult. Another man spoke up, mentioning that Kuten's attack on Knockville Village had ended in failure, then questioned whether they should act immediately. A sinister shift in the conversation occurred when Dornoa stepped forward. He smirked and informed the group that an execution was scheduled to take place in the town square in a few days. Using that opportunity, they would make their move and steal the heart of Lady Kasserek. As the men considered his words, one of them pointed to Carter, who was slumped against the wall in a deep sleep. With a suspicious glare, he asked whether Carter was actually asleep or dead. On the day of the execution in Kasserek's town square, the atmosphere was surprisingly festive, with the townspeople enjoying the occasion as if it were a holiday. Hannah had set up her stall where Kanna showcased her talent, chilling a glass of beer ice cold with a flick of her hand, leaving the crowd in awe and eager for more. Hannah soon appeared, offering freshly baked bread smothered in sweet strawberry jam paired with a glass of wine, making her stall even more popular. Meanwhile, all of Kasserek's Guard Unit 4 had been assigned to monitor both the execution and the bustling market. However, judging by their expressions, they were far from pleased about it. Hannah took a moment to thank Eren for suggesting the idea of selling strawberry jam bread and wine, as customers were flocking to their stall. Kanna's ice-cold beer was also a massive hit. Eren gave a faint smile, thinking that even if he explained the concept of marketing through association, Hannah wouldn't understand. His amusement, however, quickly faded into a frown as he recalled the cruel medieval tradition. People here literally dipped their bread in the blood of executed prisoners. Moments later, Hannah curiously asked why he had decided to take Kanna in. Eren simply replied that he wanted a cold glass of beer every day. But Hannah wasn't convinced. She knew it was rare for him to take interest in someone so easily. When she pressed him further, a memory from his past life in the modern world surfaced. With a distant look, he answered that he had once taken in a stray cat off the streets and raised it. Somehow, Kana reminded him of that cat. The thought of Aaron, with his hardened exterior, caring for a cat seemed absurd to Henna. Just then, Vermin, his eyes filled with frustration, interrupted, questioning why they were there when they were supposed to be on break. He further inquired whether their purpose there was to sell bread and alcohol. Aaron, ignoring his complaints, revealed the concerning information they had received recently. He suggested they think of this as undercover mission and report back immediately if they notice anything suspicious. As soon as Vermin heard the words undercover mission, his mood lightened and his enthusiasm peaked. Aaron then glanced around and questioned why only Vermin and Poole were there, wondering where the rest of the unit was. Vermin sighed and explained that Brig was busy talking with Charlotte, Cale was with Rosa, and Carter, as expected, was fast asleep. Later, Aaron made his way to the prison, where he found Ted standing in front of one of the cells. When he asked what the boy was doing, Ted innocently replied that their guests looked very nervous, so he was trying to comfort them. Amused, Aaron watched as Ted addressed the criminals behind bars, calmly informing them that his father had executed over 100 people and that he would make sure their deaths were quick and painless. The prisoners trembled in fear at the news of their incoming fate. One of them lunged forward, but with his mouth gagged, his protests were reduced to muffled noises. Aaron found the situation highly amusing and casually remarked that he couldn't understand a single word the man was trying to say. With a wicked grin, he dangled the keys before the prisoners and announced that their time was up and it was time for them to lose their heads. The execution commenced shortly after, and with one swift and precise swing of his axe, Dallas severed the first criminal's head. Blood spattered onto the execution platform as the crowd erupted into cheers and fueled with excitement. Without hesitation, Aaron stepped forward and dragged the next man to the platform. As he surveyed his surroundings, he couldn't help but reflect on how medieval executions function as political festival. These public displays of violence served to satisfy the suppressed aggression of the masses while reinforcing the ruler's authority. His conversation with Nova also surfaced in his mind, where she had emphasized the significance of this event. The criminals being executed had murdered a noble from Karzan, and the Lord of Casterdic was eager to mend relations with him. In that sense, this execution was more than just a punishment, it was a diplomatic event. That was why Nova had ordered Aaron to ensure the event proceeded flawlessly, declaring that no accidents should occur. As Aaron's attention snapped back to the present, his sharp gaze scanned the crowd, eventually locking onto a hooded figure acting suspiciously. His instincts kicked in, and upon closer inspection, he was taken aback when he realized that it was Dornoa. Before he could process the situation further, a deafening explosion suddenly shook the square. Chaos erupted, and the once festive crowd screamed in terror, scattering in every direction. The ground trembled beneath Aaron's feet, and before he could react, his eyes caught sight of Lord Fulputz being hurled into the air by the blast. For a brief moment, Aaron was dumbfounded. The man, flailing mid-air, looked like a bird desperately trying to fly. Reality hit him hard as he realized that the outer fortress guards were responsible for public security. If the Lord died, their heads would be the next to roll. Just then, Dallas appeared beside him, swinging his axe down with deadly precision. The sudden motion startled Aaron, who turned to him in shock. He let out a nervous breath and remarked on Dallas's skill, questioning how he was still executing criminals amidst such chaos. Chuckling, Dallas simply responded that he was doing what an executioner was meant to do. A fierce determination ignited in Aaron's eyes as he declared that he should be doing what Captain of the Guards was meant to do. Without wasting another second, he bolted toward the explosion. In the midst of the chaos, people struggled to keep their footing as screams and panicked shouts filled the air. Vermin and Poole desperately tried to calm everyone, warning that children could get hurt in the commotion. But fear had taken hold, and no one was thinking rationally. Nearby, Henna tried to calm frightened Kana, while Brig and Charlotte helped guide the crowd to safety. Through the commotion, Aaron emerged, children clinging to him as he had bravely pulled them from the chaos. He quickly scanned his surroundings and asked if anyone had seen a suspicious hooded figure, but no one could recall seeing such a person. His sharp gaze darted through the fleeing crowd until it landed on Dornoa, who was carrying an unconscious Lady Vivian in his arms. It didn't take long for Aaron to piece it together that Lady Vivian had been the true target all along. Wasting no time, he called for his unit, ordering them to follow him in pursuit of the criminal. His voice was cold as he warned them that if they failed to catch him, they would be the next ones on the guillotine. The threat sent a shiver down their spines, and they immediately fell in line, determined not to let Dornoa escape. Hours passed as they traveled through a darkened alley, their path lighted only by the dim glow of a lantern. The silence was heavy until Vermin broke the stillness, recalling the time they had chased after Hans, questioning what would happen if this turned into another dead end. Aaron shot him a sharp look and told him not to jinx it. Despite the tension, they were relieved that Lord Fulputz had survived the explosion. However, At Night had been caught in the blast and lost his life. Aaron scoffed at the news, muttering that knights who called themselves protectors of the people were hardly worth trusting. As they pressed forward, they came to an abrupt stop, eyes widening at the sight of a man slumped against the alley wall. Blood stained his armor and his face was twisted in pain. Aaron narrowed his eyes and remarked that yet another untrustworthy knight was right in front of them. Despite his injuries, Ben managed a weak smile, acknowledging that it had been a while since their last encounter. Aaron approached cautiously, his gaze sharp as he inquired if Ben had been hit. Pressing a hand to his wounds, Ben admitted that it was an embarrassing situation for him. Without hesitation, Aaron pulled out a healing potion and poured it over Ben's injuries, watching as the liquid shimmered while working its magic. He commented that every time they met, Ben seemed to be getting beaten up for nothing, questioning if he was even truly a knight. Ben winced from the potion's sting but didn't argue. Instead, he admitted that he had let his guard down, unaware that the criminal he had faced was a dark mage. Wincing in pain, he revealed a shocking truth that there was a traitor among the guards. The words struck Aaron hard, momentarily leaving him speechless. Before he could process anything further, a piercing, bone-chilling scream tore through the alley, and they immediately realized that it was Cal's voice. On the other hand, a menacing and intimidating brute was shown before Cale and Brig, who were shrieking and flailing in pain. The brute looked on in confusion, wondering what all the fuss was about, as their reactions were too much for barely getting hit once. Cale suddenly held up a hand, stopping the brute in his tracks as he muttered about expecting someone. The brute barely had time to process the words before a loud crash echoed through the air. The stone wall beside them crumbled to dust, and from the rubble, Aaron emerged. With a firm grip, Aaron grabbed the brute by the neck and lifted him effortlessly. His voice was rough as he remarked on the poor quality construction, claiming that a mere push had brought the wall down. The brute's eyes widened in terror as he struggled to free himself, his mind racing to comprehend what kind of monster was holding him. Aaron's gaze was cold as he tightened his grip, questioning why the brute was so weak compared to the demon he had fought outside the fortress. The brute's body trembled as his lungs burned for air. Just when he thought his neck would snap, Aaron released him. He collapsed to the ground, coughing and gasping desperately. Aaron's voice dropped into a threatening tone as he commanded him to start talking or face the consequences. Terror overtook the brute, and without hesitation, he blurted out the truth that the dark mage was the mastermind and had been targeting Lady Vivian's heart. The others exchanged glances, quietly acknowledging that the man had an exceptional instinct for survival. The brute continued, revealing that Dorno had made a deal with a demon through the dark mage, a figure known as the demon's servant. Their base, he claimed, was hidden in the lawless city of Turumba. Upon hearing him, Aaron realized that Dorno was basically the demon's subcontractor, but he wasn't able to grasp what he needed Vivian's heart for. The brute desperately defended his honesty, claiming that he didn't know the reason. Aaron studied him carefully and calmed him down. Deciding to spare his life for being cooperative, he instructed his men to take him away. The brute merely collapsed in relief, repeatedly expressing his gratitude for Aaron's mercy. As they led him away, Aaron's mind wandered to the dark mage, realizing that his minions were using their own lackeys to carry out their dirty work. However, despite his suspicions, Aaron couldn't quite put together the pieces to uncover Lady Vivian's true identity. His thoughts were interrupted when Carter suddenly appeared beside him, casually remarking about the Great Knight. Aaron immediately noticed something off in Carter's behavior. His tone was different and his movements were strange. Raising an eyebrow, Aaron asked if he had just woken up, suggesting that he needed to regulate his sleep properly, stating that it was a disease at that point. Carter stepped closer, his voice quiet but strained as he questioned if Aaron knew the pain of never being able to sleep. He continued, describing how it felt like he was never truly awake, as if he were trapped in a dream with a fog clouding his mind. Before Aaron could fully register his words, Carter's hand moved. A blade shone in the dim light as Carter unsheathed his sword in a swift, practiced motion, aiming straight for Aaron's throat. Reacting in an instant, Aaron blocked the strike with his own sword. With an odd calmness, he declared that he would put Aaron into a dream from which he would never wake up. In that moment, Carter's mind flashed back to his childhood, to the days when his village was struck by a severe famine. There was nothing left for the people to eat, forcing them to dig up tree roots and even hunt rats and cockroaches to consume raw. Among the starving villagers stood Carter, frail and famished, with his younger brother by his side. Then one day, against all odds, there was meat on the table. The family devoured it eagerly, their hunger momentarily satisfied. All except for Carter's younger brother, who lay sick and weak, unable to join them. Carter's stomach churned as memories of the previous night flooded his mind. A horrifying realization struck him that the meat on the table had come from his own brother. Knowing the true origin of the meal, he couldn't bring himself to take a single bite. The present came rushing back as Carter clashed blades with Aaron. He revealed that since that day he had been plagued by relentless nightmares, unable to find peace and sleep. Aaron skillfully blocked each attack, his movements sharp and precise. As he deflected a particularly aggressive strike, he commented that he had heard about it. With a powerful counter, he forced Carter back. A sinister grin spread across Carter's face as he asked if Eren was stunned because of his strength, crediting his power to the candy Dorno had given him. As Carter's eyes flashed with intensity, a mysterious aura enveloped him, casting an unusual glow. Eren's expression darkened as he immediately recognized the source. Carter had been granted power by the demon. His strength and agility had increased drastically, and despite his lack of formal training, he was naturally skilled in combat. Without warning, Carter lunged forward with his sword aimed straight for Eren's chest. However, Eren took advantage of his inexperience, dodging the attack with ease. Carter's blade lodged itself deep into the wall, leaving him momentarily vulnerable. Though his strength was undeniable, his lack of battle experience had become his greatest weakness. Eren scoffed, remarking that Carter's skill was like a poorly constructed wall, strong at a glance but ultimately weak and unstable. Angered, Carter clenched his fists and attempted to strike him, but before he could land a punch, Eren spoke in a softer tone, admitting that he understood Carter's suffering all too well, as he too had trouble sleeping at night. In a single swift motion, Eren's blade pierced Carter's chest. His grip tightened on the sword as he whispered that he forgave him, then asked if Carter would do the same. In his final moments, memories of his younger brother flooded his mind. With a gentle smile, he whispered that he was sleepy before he slumped into Eren's embrace. Eren hugged him back, suggesting him to sleep well, further stating that he would sing him the best lullaby as the last one. Meanwhile, far from the battlefield, Dorno moved swiftly through the shadows, Lady Vivian still unconscious in his grasp. Frustration burned in his eyes as he cursed the persistent guards who had been chasing him relentlessly, making him slip through a narrow tunnel. He grinned as he pulled out a dagger, his voice filled with twisted excitement, mentioning that it was all worth it because now he had captured the one who was loved by Mana. All that was left was to carve out her heart and consume it. He raised his dagger, prepared to strike, but a familiar voice cut through the darkness as someone had managed to catch up to him. From the shadows, a figure emerged, questioning how Dorno had found such a hidden passage. His tone was sharp as he further inquired if Carter had been the one to tell him. Eren stepped forward, his gaze locked onto Dorno. With a smirk, he suggested they have a quick interview before moving forward. Dorno scoffed, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the man before him. He sneered, admitting that he had expected a knight to be chasing him, only to find that it was merely a novice captain of the guards. Without hesitation, he channeled his dark magic, summoning two ferocious beasts, a massive serpent and a growling wolf. A wicked grin stretched across his face as he commanded them to attack. The serpent struck first, lunging toward Eren with its fangs bared. But with a swift draw of his sword, Eren sliced through its body, leaving the beast in two. Dorno barely flinched as he unleashed another surge of dark energy. The wolf sprang from behind, its teeth sinking deep into Eren's arm. A sharp cry of pain escaped him, but he quickly countered, stabbing his blade through the beast's body. Investigating his wound, Eren realized that the bite was more than just a physical injury, it was a magical curse. His body felt heavy, and it pained whenever he moved. He realized that he would be at a great disadvantage if that fight stretches for a long time. Dorno realized that his attack was not up to the mark, acknowledging that Eren's body was more resilient than he had expected. But he wasn't finished yet. Unleashing another burst of magic, he summoned a new pair of beasts. With a taunting smirk, he introduced them as the Shadow Legion of Lord Quentel. Eren scoffed at the idea of calling such a small number of creatures a legion, questioning if Dorno had been running an animal farm instead. Dorno's expression twisted with rage as he called Eren an insolent bastard. Without another word, he commanded the beasts to charge. Eren gritted his teeth. By all rights, he should capture Dorno alive, but he had already tricked his own subordinate and sold him to a demon. There was no redemption for him. His eyes burned with vengeance as he tightened his grip on his sword, stepping forward to face the incoming threats. With a cold voice, he declared that Dorno was sentenced to immediate death, spitting out a final insult as he charged that the bastard was nothing more than a son of a bitch. In an instant, Eren slashed through every type of beast he encountered and stood in front of Dorno. Dorno's expression turned dark as he witnessed Eren's power, prompting him to launch another attack. He began to chant, stating that those who were crushed under the weight of punishment were sinners, and unleashed his suppression magic. Just then, the ground trembled as twisted, mutated roots erupted from the earth, wrapping themselves around Eren, making him immobile. Dorno sneered as he remarked that it was a triple curse that even Night had a difficult time escaping. As the roots erupted and formed a huge, formidable beast, Dorno wielded his magic to command the beast, directing it to slam Eren with its enlarged hand. However, with a quick strike, Eren slashed the beast's hand in half, leaving Dorno bewildered. With a mocking tone, Eren commanded him to repeat himself again, mentioning that he couldn't hear him properly. Angered, Dorno gritted his teeth at Eren's toughness, and as he searched his pocket, he pulled out an unusual bottle containing a mysterious potion, stating it would be the end of Eren's foolishness. Without hesitation, Dorno threw the potion, which contained a severed cardinal's finger. As it shattered, a dark demonic entity took shape, its sharp teeth displayed at Eren. The beast screeched and immediately flung its tail to attack Eren, but he successfully dodged the attack and rushed towards the beast in an instant. As soon as he swung his sword and pounced on the entity, he realized that its skin was so tough it wouldn't even leave a scratch, and that the ordinary methods wouldn't work against it. Eren immediately formulated a plan, and as he caught his breath, he made a daring move, charging towards the beast's open mouth and plunging inside its stomach. Meanwhile, Dorno erupted into laughter, as he called Eren a fool for walking into his own death. However, he was unaware about Eren's cunning plan. On the other hand, Eren wondered why Dorno was grinning, but either way, his plan of infiltration was successful. For the next and the most important step, he tapped on his chest and called for the demon, who had been living inside him for quite some time. The demon woke up, its eyes snapping open to fix on Eren. Eren remarked that despite being silent after using his power earlier, it at least had a hint of shame left, further calling it a no-balled bitch. Additionally, he inquired if he could use the demon's power immediately, prompting it to call them disrespectful and foolish. However, it seemed quite fascinated by Eren's boldness and agreed to lend him its power. As the demon's aura enveloped Eren's sword, it made a request in exchange of its help. Eren frowned as he realized that he was negotiating with a demon after all. Upon inquiring, the demon sternly asked that he refrain from using the term no-balled bitch, stating that despite not knowing its meaning, it found that words strangely unpleasant. Eren agreed without hesitation, and with its aura enveloping him, his whole body was tingling as though he had been struck by lightning. Eren's smirk grew wider as he declared that it was going to be fun. With swift and precise strikes, he severed the beast's head in a flash, leaving Dorno stunned and bewildered. Dorno's mind raced, wondering how Eren could possess such an aura, as he began to question whether Eren was truly a knight. As the demon lay defeated behind Eren, Dorno questioned his identity, further inquiring if he was sent by the Imperial family. Dorno stuttered, asking how they had discovered his plan, mentioning that they had not received any contact about it either. However, before he could continue, Eren menacingly approached him, lashed out, and severed Dorno's head from his body with a clean strike. He further remarked that he was just a mere fortress guard. As Dorno's lifeless head lay before him, Eren finally felt a sense of peace. He bid Carter his final farewell, but his relief was short-lived. The severed head began to chant, and words it spoke formed a mysterious symbol on the ground. Eren's heart skipped a beat when he realized that the magic only activates after one's death. Dorno was making things bothersome until the very end. Without hesitation, Eren immediately rushed to fetch Lady Vivian. However, as the magic swirled around them, Eren's relief turned to terror when he encountered a gigantic, terrifying, and monstrous creature towering behind him. As the formidable beast hovered over him with a menacing glare, Eren wasted no time in making a run for it, clutching Lady Vivian tightly in his arms. However, the monster was far too enormous, and Eren soon realized that escaping its wrath was nearly impossible. Just as he braced himself to fight, a sudden scream pierced through the chaos. A woman's voice called out for Vivian. Turning around, Eren spotted Inquisitor Jonah, accompanied by a lady knight, arriving just in time for their rescue. Without hesitation, they launched a powerful attack on the beast, giving Eren the opportunity to flee into the nearby forest, still holding Vivian in his grasp. As Vivian's consciousness began to return, her eyelids fluttered open. Her vision was blurry, making it difficult to recognize who was carrying her. Before she could say a word, Eren struck her with a swift punch, knocking her unconscious once more. He hoped to avoid any misunderstandings about kidnapping her, but as she collapsed again, he wondered if he had hit her too hard. Carefully, he laid her down and covered her face with a handkerchief he had stolen from Kale. Before walking away, he muttered that it was time for the guard captain to finally get off work. Back at the battlefield, the gigantic monster lay defeated before Jonah and the Lady Knight. As the weight of the battle settled, the knight's voice trembled as she asked where Lady Vivian was. Jonah swiftly scanned their surroundings before pointing in a particular direction, stating that Vivian was right there. They both rushed forward, eager to ensure her safety, but the sight before them left them stunned. Vivian lay motionless on the ground, a handkerchief covering her face. A dark and unsettling thought crept into their minds as they silently questioned whether Lady Vivian was actually dead. With the intense battle finally over, the scene shifted to the Laughing Rabbit Inn, where the members of the Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4 had gathered for a meeting. A heavy silence hung over them as they pondered how they were supposed to stand against a dark mage. Brigg argued that the upper authorities should have handled the inspection themselves. It had already been a week since the attack, and the situation had seemingly settled. The Lord, who had flown across the sky like a hawk, had miraculously emerged unharmed, and his daughter Vivian had been safely returned. However, due to Eren's false testimony, Carter's death was officially recorded as having fallen in battle against a demon. His family had received compensation, and his honor as a guard remained intact. With a voice full of regret, Kale called Carter a reckless fool for running straight into a demon without an ounce of fear. Poole added that at least Carter had finally gotten what he wished for, a peaceful sleep. Briggs' eyes welled up with tears as he vowed to carry on Carter's courage of charging towards a demon. As Carter's sword rested on a nearby chair, every member of the unit raised their glasses, toasting to their fallen comrade, ensuring that his name would be remembered with honor. As the atmosphere shifted to the next topic, Vermin brought up the arrival of the new guard set to replace Carter. But before Aaron could respond, the door suddenly burst open. A man stepped inside, his voice filled with energy as he introduced himself as Dylan, the new recruit of the Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4. Aaron remained speechless for a moment, unable to comprehend how such an event had unfolded. Dylan, on the other hand, couldn't help but think that his relationship with Aaron would unfold like this. Poole remarked that Dylan seemed to make a decent first impression, while Briggs noted that he had some resemblance to Poole. Dylan, however, wasted no time boasting about his strength, proudly claiming that he had skillfully defeated thousands of zombies back in Knockville Village. Cal's patience wore thin as Dylan continued to ramble, while Aaron couldn't help but question how an idiot like him had managed to get recruited. Before anyone could say anything further, Henna strode into the room, slamming a glass of beer down in front of Dylan and fixing him with a sharp, piercing glare. She turned to leave, but Dylan hesitated before calling out to her, muttering an awkward apology for what had happened between them the other day. He awkwardly explained that acting like a hooligan was something of a tradition among mercenaries. Henna acknowledged his words with a cold stare, but then promptly raised her crossbow, aiming it directly at his head. She stated that running into bastards like him while on duty was nothing new for her. Without hesitation, she warned him that if he ever dared to fool around again, she would put a hole in his head without a second thought. Aaron couldn't help but admire Henna's boldness. After the commotion settled, Aaron tossed a sword to Dylan and formally assigned him as a guard of the outer fortress. He instructed him to work hard, warning that otherwise he wouldn't last long. Tears welled up in Dylan's eyes as he vowed to give his best from that moment on. Yet, as he stood there, welcomed warmly into the ranks of the Outer Fortress Guard Unit 4, Dylan would later look back on this moment with deep regret, thinking that he should have run while he still had the chance. As the new day began, Aaron was seen intimidating a man at the fortress gate, leaving Dylan momentarily stunned. However, Aaron's tone suddenly shifted as he expressed concern for the man, warning him that he would freeze to death if he slept in such a place. As the carriage rolled away, Aaron turned to Dylan and asked if he understood the implications, urging him to tighten security inspections in light of the recent demon incident. Dylan exclaimed in disbelief, questioning if that was really how inspections were supposed to be done, ripping off silver coins from coachmen and even punching someone, pretending to check if they were a demon. As he contemplated his new role as a guard, a mischievous grin spread across his face. Deciding that being stern and demanding was the way to go, he began mimicking Aaron's methods, harassing a coachman and demanding silver coins in exchange for passage through the gate. Aaron watched Dylan with a mixture of amusement and disdain, thinking that blackmailing suited him well. Moreover, he had no complaints, considering how effortlessly silver coins rolled in. Just then, a heated argument between Dylan and a man named Gelheim caught Aaron's attention. Gelheim questioned whether Dylan still planned to inspect the carriage despite the Feener family seal on it. As Dylan continued arguing, Aaron stepped in and twisted Dylan's neck lightly, silencing him. Snickering hesitantly, he explained that Dylan was still new to the job and didn't yet know all the rules. Upon inspecting the carriage, Aaron quickly realized that there were no nobles inside but only soldiers. His behavior immediately changed as he declared that it was the Lord's special order to conduct thorough inspections due to the recent unfortunate events. Turning to Gelheim, he pointed out that his previous statement implied disrespect toward their lordship, causing Gelheim to freeze in shock. A wicked grin spread across Aaron's and Dylan's faces as they hinted that the executioner would soon be busy. Gelheim, witnessing their sudden change in attitude, realized they had only adjusted their behavior after learning there were no nobles inside the carriage. Panicked, he handed Aaron a handful of silver coins and apologized, insisting that he never meant to disrespect their lordship. Taking the money, Aaron remarked that anyone could make a mistake. However, without warning, he suddenly delivered a swift kick to Gelheim, catching him off guard. As Gelheim seethed with anger, Aaron simply justified his actions by stating that it was the Lord's special order for the demon search. Sometime later, Aaron found himself standing in front of the gate of the Solar Church, having received a message from Kale that the church was looking for him. He grumbled, wondering what issue had come up, as the church was the last place he wanted to visit, especially with the demon inside him. As the church doors creaked open, Jonah stood formidably before him, catching him off guard. However, before he could react, Priest Blian interrupted, revealing that they had heard about his battle with a demon. He further stated that the Inquisitor had seen him clearly with his own eyes, protecting Lady Vivian from the giant. Thankfully, it did not seem like Jonah had witnessed him using demonic powers. Instead, Blian praised his courage, acknowledging how remarkable it was for a mere guard captain to fight against a demon. As a reward for his strong faith, they had prepared a compensation for him. Aaron's expression immediately brightened at the mention of compensation, thinking it would be something valuable, perhaps as grand as the golden brooch he had received last time. With a hesitant chuckle, he humbly admitted that his faith was nothing compared to Priest Blian's. However, his enthusiasm quickly faded when the reward was revealed to be a new cape, meant to enhance his appearance. Blian proudly announced that Aaron was now an honorary conventual, but Aaron's response was underwhelming. He offered a half-hearted acknowledgement, pretending to be grateful, while internally grumbling that they should have given him money instead. Blian then mentioned that Jonah wished to look around the fortress and requested that Aaron guide her, insisting that they were practically family at this point. Before Aaron could protest, Blian swiftly departed, leaving him seething with rage. As the truth sank in, he clenched his teeth, realizing that he had only been summoned to take care of the leftovers. Stylingly, he swore that one day he would pound Blian into a pulp. However, a greater danger loomed over him. If Joanna discovered the demon inside him, she would likely crack his head open with her mace. Hesitantly, he asked if she was hungry, suggesting that they visit a restaurant he frequently went to. In an unexpected turn, Aaron took Joanna to a restaurant owned by Briggs' mother, famous for its signature fish bread dish. His intention was clear. He wanted to ensure the church would never have business with him again. As Joanna took a bite of the fish bread, her expression stiffened and Aaron suppressed a chuckle. Internally, he apologized, knowing he couldn't afford to be around an inquisitor while having a demon. However, his amusement quickly turned to panic when Joanna unexpectedly offered him a piece. Realizing his mistake, he swiftly stuffed his mouth with fish bread, emptying the plate to avoid raising her suspicions. Watching her struggle through the meal, Aaron couldn't help but think that she was tougher than he had expected. Just then, Briggs' mother arrived with another serving of fish bread. Unable to handle any more, Joanna abruptly stood up and bolted out the door. Briggs' mother looked on in confusion, asking why she had left so suddenly. Aaron, still savoring his victory, casually replied that something urgent must have come up. However, his satisfaction was short-lived when Briggs' mother, smiling sweetly, placed another plate of fish bread in front of him. She explained that she had prepared extra, seeing how well they had been eating. At that moment, Aaron couldn't help but think that getting his head cracked open with a mace seemed like the better option. A while later, Kale arrived, momentarily stunned as he remarked on how Aaron's attire seemed to be becoming more elaborate by the day. Aaron casually responded that several shops had started offering him discounts after he wore the cape, adding that being an honorary conventual had its perks. Shocked, Hale muttered that it seemed like the Empire was on the verge of collapse if someone like Aaron had managed to attain such a title. Shifting the conversation, Kale mentioned that the upper authorities had sent soldiers from the Feener family to work with them. He relayed the Lord's orders to maintain a good relationship with those soldiers, warning that any conflict could result in severe punishment. Aaron scoffed at the warning, questioning why he would need to be told such a thing. He wasn't a thug and saw no reason to fight someone he was supposed to work with. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Gelheim came stomping toward him, his face red with rage as he called Aaron an uneducated guard bastard. Unfazed, Aaron simply took a sip of his beer and remarked that a one-sided beating shouldn't count as a fight. Gelheim's face turned red with fury as he confronted Aaron, demanding to know if he truly had the audacity to strike him over the head with such a blatant lie. Without uttering another word, Aaron simply said, "One." Kale immediately sensed what was about to unfold, and with a sharp screech, he reminded Aaron that, as an honorary conventual, he shouldn't be causing a scene. Gelheim's anger boiled over as he scoffed at the idea, taunting Aaron by asking if he had suddenly grown afraid, further reminding him to remember his place as a mere guard. Aaron's patience snapped, and with a single word, 3, he delivered a powerful punch, knocking Gelheim to the ground. As Gelheim groaned in pain, Aaron casually declared that it wasn't a fight but a one-sided assault. Meanwhile, Cal stood frozen, realizing it was a countdown. He muttered in disbelief, questioning where 2 had gone. With a mix of frustration and anger, Kale pointed out that a one-sided assault was an even bigger problem, but Aaron brushed it off with a smirk, assuring him that it was fine since he was an honorary conventual. Shortly after, Gelheim was slumped against the wall, his face bruised and swollen. As he regained consciousness, he looked at Aaron with a mixture of respect and disbelief, acknowledging that Aaron was a formidable fighter. He went on to claim that someone with his level of strength had no business working as a mere guard captain, suggesting that he had more than enough potential to serve as a noble's private soldier. Defensively, Gelheim insisted that his defeat wasn't due to weakness, but rather because Aaron was incredibly strong. Kale, however, had his own thoughts on the matter, silently convinced that Gelheim was just making excuses to soothe his wounded pride. As they exchanged names and briefly got acquainted, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by Aaron's continued habit of smacking passersby on the head. Gelheim, bewildered, questioned what Aaron had been doing, to which Kale explained that according to Aaron, this was a method to detect demons. However, Kale personally believed it looked more like a stress relief technique. To everyone's shock, the man Aaron had just struck suddenly transformed into a demon, glaring at him in outrage. The demon demanded to know how Aaron dared to hit him in the head, its monstrous voice filled with fury. Kale and Gelheim stood frozen, astonished that Aaron had actually managed to uncover a demon with his bizarre technique. Meanwhile, Aaron himself was taken aback by his unexpected success, leaving Kale convinced that Aaron had simply been smacking people for no reason. Fortunately, the demon turned out to be a mere lackey, but the fact that another one had appeared so soon after the last incident threw the fortress into chaos. That day, Aaron witnessed the strongest warriors of Kassertic Fortress gather in one place. Aaron felt somewhat sorry for the demon as they slashed it mercilessly, despite its monstrous nature. Later that evening, Aaron stepped into the Laughing Rabbit Inn, only to be met with Dylan's enthusiastic greeting and an unexpected offer for a bath. Perplexed, Aaron asked what Dylan was doing there, but before he could get an answer, Henna intervened. She commanded Dylan to check on the hall and explained to Aaron that Dylan kept coming by to apologize, so she had put him to work instead. She mentioned that the inn was bustling with business, largely thanks to the popularity of the cold beer. Aaron took a sip, savoring the refreshing taste, and quickly understood why it was selling so well. Casting a glance at Kenna, he was amazed at the kind of magic she possessed. It seemed like a waste to use someone with such potential as nothing more than a refrigerator. Since magic books were both rare and expensive, he briefly considered whether he should start investing in upgrading his mini-fridge. A few days later, a young boy named Furus and a man named Lebby rode a horse-drawn carriage, when a stern voice from behind barked at them to steady the carriage. The voice carried a warning, making it clear that any foolish actions could cost them their lives before they even reached the fortress. Inside the carriage, one of the soldiers, Jacob, grumbled about the need of coming all the way to the countryside just to track down a single person. He bitterly remarked that their boss had a chronic habit of never letting go of anything that fell into his grasp. Another soldier, however, dismissed Jacob's complaints, reminding him that their boss's orders were absolute. He sternly warned Jacob to keep his expressions in check, emphasizing that recklessness would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, Furus anxiously questioned whether bringing those soldiers along was truly the right decision, fearing that they were putting themselves at risk if they got caught during the inspection. Lebby, however, reassured him, explaining that Kassertic Fortress only pretended to do a rough inspections. As long as they handed over a silver coin, they would be fine. He promised that once they entered the fortress and dropped the soldiers off, everything would be safe. As they approached the fortress gate, they were met by Poole and several other guards. Lebby exchanged casual greetings with Poole, but he couldn't help but notice the unusually large number of guards stationed there. He recalled that there were usually only 2, but he brushed aside his concerns, feeling relieved that the guard captain was nowhere in sight. After a brief exchange, Lebby discreetly handed Poole a silver coin. Just as he thought he was in the clear, Dylan's piercing screech rang out, pointing out that there were 3 additional soldiers in the carriage. He insisted that they should be paying extra. Panic-stricken, Lebby stuttered as he hastily agreed to pay more if necessary, but Poole assured him that the amount was sufficient. Despite the reassurances, Lebby felt a growing sense of fear, realizing that if the soldiers in the carriage were discovered, the consequences would be dire. They needed to find a way to get through the gate without suspicion, no matter what. At that moment, Aaron arrived, and Kale informed him that ever since he had successfully uncovered a demon, the inspection methods had changed under the commander's orders. Now, every passenger was required to exit their carriage and undergo individual inspections. If anyone appeared remotely suspicious, the guards had full authority to bash their heads in with a bat. Dylan wasted no time carrying out the new procedure and delivered a powerful strike to one of the guards, Jake, instantly knocking him unconscious. In an instant, Jacob and the other soldier drew their swords, ready for a fight. Aaron, watching the scene unfold, sighed in disapproval, questioning why Dylan was using a wooden bat instead of his fists, further calling it a ridiculous method. Kale reminded him that this was his own method, but Aaron quickly corrected him, emphasizing that he used his fists, not a wooden bat. He shook his head in disappointment, wondering what kind of idiot just stood still and allowed themselves to be hit. In his mind, he grumbled that these medieval bastards truly had no sense of mediocrity. Before anyone could react further, Dylan let out another shriek, announcing that the guards were actually demons. The fortress guards immediately launched their spears at them, cutting them down in a brutal assault. As they lay defeated, they realized that one of their comrades, Jake, was still alive, and that he would carry on with their mission. As Aaron prepared to leave, he mentioned that the checkpoint inspections were bound to be a mess from now on. Kale, curious, asked where he was headed. Aaron nonchalantly replied that he was going to upgrade his mini-fridge, completely unaware that the soldiers had come for Kanna. At the inn, Kanna peered out, watching Aaron as he summoned her with a bizarre smile, addressing her as Kanu. As she approached, she politely corrected him, stating her name was Kanna. As he gently patted on her head, he inquired about the magic she could do at the moment, to which she responded that she could do magic dice, make things cold, and some basic clairvoyance. He further asked whether she learned magic from those gambling addicts, but Kana stated that she learned it from a man, who used to call himself a man with a knowledge of romance. As Eren glanced at her, he wondered if someone like her could really learn new magic with just some books. In a moment of desperation, Kana quickly claimed that she was known for learning things rapidly and she excelled at her skills. Additionally, she mentioned that Henna had praised her for her dishwashing abilities. At that moment, he thought about Avery from the past, where Eren had asked how she had learned magic. She had responded by saying she was desperate to learn magic. Moreover, she had added that Eren lacked the intelligence to learn magic, and that she herself was a genius. Back to the present, Kana pleaded Eren to not abandon her, and he immediately instructed her to not say such stuff, which could easily make others misunderstand. Additionally, he inquired whether she was willing to learn magic, to which Kana enthusiastically asserted and asked him to give orders. Her enthusiasm reminded him of Dylan, as he mentioned that she had been influenced by him. Just after that, Kana hesitated before revealing that she wanted to tell him something. But before she could proceed, they were interrupted by Dylan's sudden entrance through the door. He announced that they had a more bigger issue to attend to, as all the guards they caught had escaped the prison. He further revealed that one of them bit and broke apart the wooden shackles and ran away. Not only that, he also fought the armed guards without even a weapon. Dylan was in a state of panic, realizing that he had been the one who had restrained the brute by knocking him out earlier. As he desperately asked for advice, Eren replied that whatever happened to Dylan was not his concern. Dylan then informed him that he was called out to gather at the headquarters immediately. Eren clicked his tongue in annoyance and instructed Henna to keep the doors locked, citing the danger, and asked Kana to keep watch for anyone knocking on the door, taking advantage of her sixth sense abilities. With the instruction laid, he dragged Dylan along with him, stating that he needed to go patrolling. At the headquarters, Manuel's howl filled the entire room as he called everyone fool for letting the imprisoned men escape. However, one of the guard blamed the wooden shackled, mentioning that they had suggested him to replace it with iron ones. Enraged, Manuel inquired if they knew the cost of iron shackles, stating one iron shackle was worth 50 wooden ones. Eren intervened, remarking that seeing those guys escaped, it simply meant that they might have something going on in their minds, given they couldn't just be obediently locked up. Another guy beside him mentioned that he did some research on the guy that had escaped, and it turned out he was a fixer from Karzan, and he was pretty infamous notorious in Karzan. Upon hearing him, Eren was quite shocked that Dylan actually managed to catch a guy like that, further wondering if that was the reason Dylan was terrified earlier. In the heat of moment, Furious interrupted their meeting and called for the guard's captain. Furious pointed at Eren, mockingly referring to him as scary-looking muscles, and asked if he was the captain. Eren was momentarily stunned at his remark, but he swiftly grabbed Furious' head and asked why he was speaking so rudely to someone older. Furious apologized to him, but he immediately informed that his teacher, Lebi, didn't do anything wrong. Another guard intruded in and reported that the man who brought the Karzan's fixer was Lebi, the man who occasionally came by Kassertic Fortress to trade. However, Furious revealed that they had no choice but to let them in their carriage because they were being threatened. Though Eren called it unfortunate, he further informed Furious that they couldn't let Lebi off regardless of their relationship if he escaped. As heavy rain poured down on the streets, the prisoners desperately ran for their lives. Among them was Lebi, who had been brought along despite not even considering escape in the first place. The prisoners referred to the method of bashing heads during inspection as terrifying. However, their attention was suddenly diverted by a loud whistle, and they immediately began running in the opposite direction. However, they were unaware about the fact that the whistle was just for luring them in. Eren stood at the end of the road, blocking the prisoners' escape route. As the prisoners lunged at him, declaring in a 1 versus 7 battle, they were quickly overpowered by Eren's overwhelming strength, being knocked down one by one. Watching the scene, Lebi trembled in fear, wondering if Eren was even human. Lebi was consumed with fear, knowing that his encounter with that devilish human as a prison breaker meant he was next on the list to be eliminated. As Eren approached him, he stumbled over the ground and pleaded Eren to spare his life. But to his surprise, Eren grabbed him by the collar, asking why he had escaped and caused trouble for everyone. He also mentioned that his student was looking for him. As soon as Eren released him, Lebi rushed to Furious and gave him a tight hug. Captain Eren's actions were rough and sometimes a chaotic tearaway who swings his fists around, but he may not be a character to judge solely based on his actions on a regular basis. Moreover, Eren inquired the direction of Jack, and he got to know that he was hiding around in District 5, the area where the Laughing Rabbit Inn was located. On the other hand, as Jack stood outside the inn, he was ambushed by Poole, Dylan, and Scar. As they launched a surprise attack, Scar declared that he wouldn't tolerate a criminal roaming around the area without his permission. Stating his name and announcing he was the Shadow of Kassertic Fortress, he launched another attack on him. However, Scar's attack was no match for Jack's lightning-fast speed, as he quickly drew his sword and slashed Scar, leaving Poole and Dylan speechless. With a menacing look, Jake declared that he was looking for a little girl with purple hair. As Scar lay defeated, Poole dashed towards Jake in an attempt to attack him. However, Jake's swift stab caught Poole off guard, prompting him to urgently tell Dylan to flee. As Dylan ran, he reflected on the hopelessness of their situation, realizing that even 3 people couldn't win against someone like Jake. Dylan reminisced about his time with Poole, and he apologized to him, acknowledging that Poole had treated him, a lowly mercenary, with kindness of a true brother. However, he further thought that people who are destined to live must live, so there was no way he would just leave him behind. With a piercing scream, Dylan called Jake a son of a bitch and taunted him by saying that he had been beaten by him. He further provoked Jake by mentioning that all of his little siblings had been grilled on skewers. Jake's anger boiled over, and in a flash, he approached Dylan and pinned him down with his sword. With a sigh, Dylan inquired just where the hell was Aaron in moments like those, as he was someone who normally showed up out of nowhere each and every time. Furthermore, he pondered that even if his shitty life was miserable, he thought that if he kept living somehow, he would eventually find some kind of meaning to it. Fueled by anger and frustration, Dylan mustered all his strength and shouted Aaron's name, calling him a shithead and accusing him of being absent when needed. Just as he finished his sentence, a swift punch flew towards him, striking Jake's face. It was Aaron, who was infuriated by Dylan's insulting remark. Realizing he had gone too far, Dylan pretended to be knocked out, aware of the consequences of running his mouth too much. Meanwhile, Jake was enraged as he stated that all of those guards were desperate to die by his hand. However, Aaron grinned as he inquired if Jake was the one who got beaten up by a weasel like Dylan. Out of the blue, Aaron made an unexpected remark when he asked Jake to brush the leaf that was stuck on his shoulder, but as soon as Jake turned around, Aaron lunged at him without warning. Though Jake was able to block the attack with his sword, Aaron mentioned that the one who gets deceived was the real fool. With that remark, Aaron delivered a crushing blow to Jake's face, sending him stumbling backwards. As Jake regained his footing, Aaron once again asked how he could have been knocked out by a mere weasel. He also questioned Jake's presence in the remote district, wondering what business he had there. In response, Jake revealed that he was looking for a short girl with purple hair, further inquiring if he had seen her before. Aaron's eyes narrowed as he realized that Jake was referring to Kanna. He also connected the dots, suspecting that those thugs from the Sick Mermaid Inn were also from Karzan. However, he called the senders frugal for sending a whole fixer to retrieve a beggarly mage. Upon Aaron's silence, Jake assumed that he did know about Kanna's whereabouts, and as his face darkened, he remarked that he wouldn't hold back unless Aaron obediently lead him to her. However, in an unexpected turn of events, Jake was suddenly silenced as Dylan shoved his sword into his chest. As Jake coughed blood from his mouth, he collapsed to the ground, unable to react or utter a word. With a deep sigh of relief, Aaron gazed at Jake, who lay defeated on the ground, and mentioned that he just wanted to drink a glass of beer. As a light rain fell the next morning, Dylan stood proudly before the injured Poole, boasting about his bravery and describing how he had skillfully provoked and killed Jake with a single deadly strike. Just then, Aaron arrived and asked about everyone's injury, further showcasing his visiting gift to them. However, their enlightened expressions soon faded when they saw that he had brought fish bread for them. Upon seeing that Aaron had brought 3 servings, Scar, still wrapped in bandages, muttered that he couldn't eat because he was fasting at that moment. Poole's lips curled into a grin when he mentioned that there was a portion left for Aaron to eat too. Back at the Laughing Rabbit Inn, Furus attempted to win Hannah with compliments, but she barely acknowledged him. Instead, she focused on Aaron, who had just entered the bar. She offered him a glass of beer filled with ice, which immediately lightened his mood. Furthermore, Aaron inquired whether she had any dreams for her future, further laying examples like a knight or a lady of a house. However, Hannah's response was plain as she mentioned that she just wanted to live. Aaron gazed at her before leaving a faint smile, stating that he would try his best in making her dreams come true. He gave her a gentle pat on the head before leaving the scene. At the church, Aaron was seen negotiating with a potion vendor named Ketchup, who informed him that they barely had lowest-grade potions in stock, yet Aaron kept asking for more. Furthermore, Ketchup specified that each bottle would cost 90 silvers, stating that Aaron should just get lost if he wasn't going to buy one. Aaron's patience was running thin as he argued with himself whether it would be all right for conventuals to beat each other up. But before he could react, they were interrupted by conventual Ains, who inquired why Ketchup was giving him the regular price. He further mentioned that Aaron was an honorary conventual, and even Priest Blyan and Inquisitor Jonah requested for him at the church and personally appointed him. Upon hearing him, Ketchup scoffed in disappointment and reduced the price down to 50 silver coins per potion. A look of pure joy crossed Aaron's face as the price dropped by almost 50%. He expressed his deep gratitude to Ains, stating that he got those potions for cheap all thanks to him. to which Ains responded that Aaron was entitled to that authority. Additionally, he asked Aaron to understand Kettup's change of attitude. Since the abbot was said to come to Kassertic Fortress soon, everyone in that church was quite busy with the preparations. With that, Ains turned to depart, bidding Aaron farewell as he took his leave. As Aaron watched Ains walk away, he couldn't help but think that there were indeed some sensible individuals like Ains within the church, unlike Priest Bland and Inquisitor Jonah. Just then, Aaron's eyes landed in Jonah, who was peacefully savoring her cheesecake outside the church. The sight of her promoted Aaron to remark that the person who lacked common sense appeared right in front of him. As soon as Jonah saw him, she marched towards Aaron with determination, then unexpectedly offered a piece of cheesecake with a warm smile. Just as suddenly, she turned and left, leaving Aaron confused and wondering whether she was a normal human being. The scene then shifted to the headquarters, where Manuel informed his underlings about the peace officer's anger, stating that although it was the mistake of the guards from the Fiener family, they were powerless to do anything but follow orders. To make matters worse, Manuel announced that there would be no off-duties for the next month, leaving the guards stunned and sending them into an uproar of complaints, with some even labeling Manuel a heartless demon. Aaron commented that it was all the commander's fault, to which his mate guard mentioned that no off-duty was a bit too harsh for everyone. Moreover, his companion informed him that the eldest son of the Fiener family was expected to visit their fortress. Aaron asked if he was referring to the son who had once been a knight candidate. The guard confirmed, explaining that he was the one who had graduated from the Imperial Institution, but had never actually become a knight. Aaron's thoughts shifted to the abbot, who was already making his way down from the church. Now, with the arrival of the Fiener family's eldest son, he felt like troublesome matters were piling up one after another. At that moment, Manuel approached Aaron and leaned in, whispering that Nova was calling for him. The words sent a shiver down Aaron's spine, and a wave of anxiety washed over him, leaving him visibly trembling. The next moment, Nova was seen describing about a door to Aaron. She explained that if one opens a door, it forms a space where people can move through and use that space to go in and out. She then held onto the doorknob, describing how it was so easy to open a gate. However, Aaron's response was predictable when he stated that everyone knew how a door worked. Nova's face turned red with anger as she snapped at him, asking why he never used the door and always resorted to smashing everything. Pointing a stern finger at him, she demanded to know if he had any idea how many walls he had broken and whether he thought it was acceptable to go around smashing through them. Aaron simply shrugged, claiming he had no other choice. He then asked if he looked like the kind of person who would destroy walls just for the fun of it, adding that if he had been even a little later, his comrades would have been in serious danger. Nova let out a long sigh of disbelief before informing him that the cost of repairing the walls would be deducted from his bounty rewards. She added that there was a considerable sum saved up from the criminals he had captured. She slid a single silver coin toward him, explaining that it was all that remained after covering the repair costs. In an instant, Aaron tossed the silver coin back towards Nova, stating it was a tip for her, further suggesting that she should treat herself to something delicious and enjoy a glass of beer while she was at it. In a mocking tone, he further reminded her that people could easily get bone disease when they stay in their room too much. Nova's voice trembled with fury as she shouted that she was going to die of anger because of him, not from any bone disease. With a mocking grin, he pushed the door open, making a point to mention that he didn't break the door. Nova's patience snapped as she shouted at him to get out. Shortly after, Aaron strolled through the streets alongside Kale, who casually asked if his meeting with Nova had gone well. Aaron replied that it was over and quickly suggested they head out on patrol. While inspections, where he could legally pocket some extra coin, were more entertaining, patrolling had its own kind of fun. After all, medieval troublemakers found new ways to stir up chaos every day. As they made their way through the bustling streets, they stumbled upon two young men locked in a heated fight. Without hesitation, Aaron stepped forward and proposed a simple solution that whoever won the fight would be declared the rightful one. The two of them engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand combat, and Aaron confidently placed a silver coin bet on the tiny guy, while Kale placed his bet on the other fighter. Suddenly, the kids let out a chuckle and took off running upon seeing Aaron, warning the other to run too and screaming that they would be eaten if Aaron caught them. Aaron looked on in confusion, wondering if they thought he was an orc or some other monster. Furthermore, Aaron remarked that the day had been quite peaceful, wondering if there was anything exciting happening. However, his attention was suddenly diverted by a woman's scream, as she demanded the suspects to return her stolen silverware. As Kale and Aaron intervened, the woman pointed towards the three suspects and complained that they stole her silverware, an item that had been passed on with each generation in her family. Without hesitation, one of the suspects protested that it wasn't him, as he inquired who would even want to steal those rusty silverware. Another suspect, a girl, interrupted and denied the accusation, stating that she had her own silverware mirror at home. The last suspect also denied it, explaining he didn't even know why he was called in the first place. Caleb glanced at Aaron and suggested him to not take on such an annoying job. However, Aaron was too invested in their argument that he even pointed out that the culprit was among those suspects. With sheer determination, Aaron asked the victim about the occurrence of the crime, to which the woman explained that the silverware was present at home during dinner the previous night but vanished by the time she was about to have breakfast the next morning. She was sure that it was stolen by one of those suspects because they were the ones living close to her house. After hearing the woman's account, Aaron turned to the suspects and asked them to describe their activities from the previous night to the present morning. The first suspect, a goblin physique, claimed that he finished organizing the hay battle last night and immediately returned home to sleep right away, further stating that he didn't even have dinner. Aaron gazed at him suspiciously because it seemed unusual for him to skip dinner in a medieval age where eating 3 meals a day was the meaning of life. The second suspect, a girl with crooked teeth, declined to discuss about personal matters in front of them, further adding that she had her own silver mirror in her home that was far more valuable than those mere silverware. Aaron raised an eyebrow, wondering that a silver mirror wasn't an item that a commoner like her could own, which made her statement suspicious. Coming to the last suspect, pale skin, who argued that he hadn't set foot outside his home and had only been outside because the woman had dragged him out forcefully. The woman screeched on the top of her lungs, specifying that the pale face was the most suspicious because it was her first time seeing his face. Aaron sighed, acknowledging that he didn't have no other choice but to use that last resort. He then ordered each suspect to lead them to their respective homes, which left them speechless and paled. Aaron wasn't aware at that time that this incident, which he took on out of boredom, would lead to a significant result. In a stern tone, Cale demanded to know if they thought they were asking for approval. He asked if the guards see him east targets because of their kindness before ordering them to lead the way to their home. Judging by those suspects' reactions, Aaron deduced that all 3 of them had something that they were hiding. A huge smile plastered upon his face as he mentioned that he was just about to get bored, so that was a perfect timing for him. Their first stop was the residence of the girl with crooked teeth, where they found that she actually owned a silver mirror. The girl exclaimed in her defense that some rusty silverware was nothing compared to that mirror, further stating that she was not the culprit. Aaron scanned the surrounding and noted that the house was plain and quite vacant, but the fact that the silver mirror was the only valuable thing in the house was quite suspicious. However, it was clear that she didn't steal those silverware, but the only unpredictable things in that house were men's underwear. As Aaron's face twisted in disgust, Cale remarked that the room had an unusual smell, with a scent typically associated with middle-aged men, which was unexpected in a house where a woman lived alone. By the looks of it, Aaron immediately realized that the woman was committing adultery. Aaron was about to explain that adultery was considered a felony, but before he could complete his sentence, the woman cut him off. She nervously offered them cheesecake and invited them to help themselves while they explored the house, hoping to change the conversation. Aaron's eyes lit up at the sight of the cheesecake, leaving him to quickly dismiss the issue and take a delighted bite. Their next stop was the residence of the pale-faced man, where they encountered a large pile of books scattered around. Cale remarked that the man appeared to be well-read, and Aaron casually glanced at a nearby book, inquiring if it was a romance novel. Just then, a bracelet which was placed between the books caught Aaron's attention. He immediately put the bracelet on and admired how perfectly it was going with the clothes he was wearing. He thought that the man probably wouldn't even care if it was gone, further debating if he should just take the bracelet. Just then, a loud burp erupted from Aaron, and when Cale inquired about it, Aaron nervously replied that his shoulder was just a bit sore. In reality, that burp was from the demon inside him, and Aaron gritted his teeth in anger, questioning if that demon was trying to get them caught. Just then, Cale inquired about the bracelet which Aaron had put on, prompting Aaron to reply hesitantly. However, that pale-faced man was unfazed, and he allowed Aaron to keep the bracelet if he liked it so much. Aaron was overjoyed upon hearing that and immediately pronounced the man innocent. In a stern voice, Cale inquired who in the world declares innocence like they were doing goodwill. As they made their way toward the final suspect's house, Aaron remarked that patrolling was always entertaining, adding that he was curious to see what kind of souvenir awaited him this time. Cale, lowering his voice, whispered that the goblin-like man was likely the culprit since the first 2 suspects had been innocent. His suspicious behavior only added to the doubt. Aaron, however, dismissed the rush to judgment. He assured Cale that he would conduct a thorough search before jumping to any conclusions. Once inside, he planned to inspect every nook and cranny of the house to make sure nothing was overlooked. However, they were awestruck when they entered the stable and saw a majestic white horse dressed in charming clothes and accessories. The man affectionately called it Charbert and enthusiastically hugged it, welcoming Cale and Aaron as their first visitors to their home that day. However, the man's obsessive affection to Charbert left both Aaron and Cale stunned. As the man was about to cook a special hay stew for dinner, Aaron gave him a sudden kick, stating that he knew the man was a famous horseman on Casterdic Fortress. As they gathered in front of the victim's house in the evening, Aaron asked who the culprit was. To their astonishment, the woman suddenly appeared, looking embarrassed, and confessed that she had discovered the silverware hidden in the haystack, leaving both Aaron and Kale speechless. Aaron went back to the inn and was quite upset that he did all that hard work for nothing because of that woman. However, it was thanks to that his patrolling time was spent well. Just then, Kanna arrived and handed him a glass of beer, with an unusual smile on her face. Confused, Aaron wondered what that expression was for, but soon he was taken aback when he noticed flower-shaped ice in his beer mug. Kanna stood proudly before him as she announced that she had worked hard for it. On the other hand, Aaron was still shocked, but he appreciated her hard work, all the while thinking that her hard work was going in the wrong direction. However, seeing her happiness and determination, he left a faint smile and decided to not ruin the mood, thinking that he would just get her the magic book as soon as possible. Just then, Kanna noticed the silver bracelet on his hand and began staring at it intensely. Realizing it, Aaron inquires whether she liked the bracelet. When she nodded, he immediately handed it to her, remarking that she had got some weird taste. Upon receiving the bracelet, Kanna's face brightened up, prompting Aaron to wonder that it was an unexpectedly nice bracelet for something so old. He further thanked the pale-faced guy for the bracelet, mentioning that he was a better person than he had anticipated, and that he would later give him fish bread as a gift in return. On the other hand, the pale-faced man felt a chill run down his spine as he gathered his scattered books. He bitterly cursed the fortress, declaring that he never wanted to set foot in that fortress, which was filled with ignorance and barbarism. In a harsh tone, he growled that a commoner had dared to grab the collar of a mage from the White Magic Tower. Additionally, he cursed Aaron, labeling him as rude and insolent for entering his home. Furthermore, he revealed that he had already casted a differentiation spell in case these kinds of situations arise, and since his magic books appeared as ordinary novels to outsiders, he had no fear of being discovered. Back when Aaron was inspecting the room and stumbled upon the silver bracelet, the man's tongue had caught between his teeth in surprise, because that was not an ordinary bracelet a mere person like Aaron should be laying her hands on. However, the man had remained shocked when Aaron remained unfazed by the magic, even when he was not a knight who could control aura. Aaron ended up taking the bracelet, leaving the man wondering about his mysterious identity. Despite the unexpected turn of events, the man kept his composure, unwilling to risk exposing his true identity. His sole purpose remained unchanged, which was to investigate the person loved by Mana. As the guards stood at the caserted fortress gate for their routine inspection, Brig questioned why the Feener family's soldiers were keeping their distance. Aaron scoffed, remarking that they had probably been beaten up by a guard after causing trouble at a tavern. Just as they were engaged in their conversation, a carriage approached, and Aaron immediately recognized it as one belonging to the noble Feener family. He wondered if this was the eldest son his fellow guard had mentioned earlier. Without hesitation, he instructed Brig to lower his head in respect, confirming that the man inside was indeed the eldest son. The man inside flashed an odd smile and drove into the fortress, leaving Aaron wondering about the noble's lack of manners as the carriage sped past without slowing down for inspection. Shortly after, another carriage arrived and came to a stop for inspection. When Aaron asked for the passenger's name, the young man inside cheerfully introduced himself as Shone, a third-level administrator from Karzan. He explained that he had come to collect bounty rewards. Aaron gestured for him to proceed into the inner fortress, noting that Shone was giving a city vibe. As the carriage departed, Brig muttered about the unusually high number of carriages that day, adding that he still felt uneasy dealing with high-ranking individuals. Aaron told him to watch his mouth, warning that he would jinx himself if he kept talking like that. In an unexpected turn, a third carriage pulled up and an elderly gentleman stepped out. He addressed Aaron by name, asking if he was the honorary conventual. Noticing the church's emblem on the carriage, Aaron immediately suspected the man was the abbot. He quickly offered his respects, but the man politely corrected him, pointing out that his right elbow should be raised higher. Before stepping back into the carriage, the abbot remarked that Aaron's faith seemed as strong as the reports had claimed and suggested they have a more in-depth conversation later. As the carriage disappeared into the fortress, Brig, noting the presence of both the church and the Feener family, muttered that things were about to get busy. Before long, Nova arrived to meet Aaron, but before she could speak, he teasingly asked what she was doing outside the orchard, earning an irritated glare. Shone accompanied her, and Nova instructed Aaron to bring that out. Complying, he pulled out a blood-stained sack. Nova turned to Shone and asked if this was what he had come for, the heads of Jake and the other two men from Karzan. The moment Shone caught sight of the contents, he gagged and threw up, nodding weakly to confirm the bounty. Aaron helped him load the sack into the carriage while Shone thanked him, admitting that he had a weak stomach. Still recovering, Shone expressed his relief that Jake had finally been caught. He explained that Jake had been so notorious he had earned the nickname Wolf Ghost, and that the organization he had been involved with was a significant problem back in Karzan. Upon hearing Shon's words, Aaron suspected that Jake had been looking for Kana, wondering if another fixer would come after her in the future. With his business in Kasserdik complete, Shon, now a mix of excitement and desperation, asked about the finest restaurants in the fortress. Aaron's first thought was to take him to Briggs' mother's place, but he reconsidered and instead recommended Hessen Bakery, the most popular spot in District 3. He casually suggested accompanying Shon, who readily agreed, unaware that Aaron's true intention was to gather more information about the organization Kenna was connected to. At the bakery, the owner proudly recommended their signature dish, cheesecake, boasting that even his wife, once the famed beauty of Kasserdik Fortress, had been won over by it. Shon took a bite and admitted that the atmosphere in the fortress was better than he had expected. He mentioned hearing unsettling rumors about strange occurrences in Kasserdik, which had made him anxious on the journey. As Aaron tasted the cheesecake, the familiar flavor triggered a memory of Jonah forcefully feeding him the same dessert. Pushing the thought aside, he refocused on the conversation as Shon revealed that Karzan was currently in chaos due to the growing aggression of an organization called the Lone Wolf. He explained that Karzan had 3 major organizations: Lone Wolf, an increasingly dangerous group; Frosty Dagger, an organization with a long history; and Cute Rabbit, which functioned more like a civilian guild. Shon further confirmed that Jake had been affiliated with the Lone Wolf. Aaron pressed for details about their leader, and Shon's expression darkened. He revealed that the man in charge was named Philip, a bastard son of some noble family, rumored to have been banished after failing to poison the eldest son. What made Philip truly terrifying, however, was his possessiveness. Shon then shared an unsettling tale. Once members of Frosty Dagger had visited a tavern owned by Philip and, as a joke, had taken a cheap decorative sword displayed on the wall. It was an insignificant matter that anyone could have brushed off as a joke, but Philip saw it differently. To him, they had stolen something that belonged to him. In the end, he managed to take back the sword, leaving a trail of dead Frosty members who stood in his way. Listening to the story, Aaron thought Philip truly lived up to the name of a wolf. Once he sank his teeth into something, he would never let go, relentless and unstoppable, until his death. He wondered if Philip viewed Kenna as his possession as well. If so, the man might not realize that his own teeth could lead to his downfall if he bit into the wrong thing. A grin spread across Aaron's face as he entertained the idea of taking a short trip to Karzan. A 3-day business trip, he figured, should be enough. The next day, just as Shon and Nova were preparing to leave for Karzan, Aaron stepped in and casually requested to join them. When questioned, he informed Nova that he had business in Karzan. She studied him for a long moment before allowing it, stating that she trusted he had secured permission from the Outer Fortress Guard Commander, to which Aaron assured her that he had. One of the other guards voiced his concerns, questioning if she truly intended to bring Aaron along. Nova explained that the Inner Fortress guards were already assigned to the trip. If they left their posts, their duties would fall to the Feener family's soldiers, which was hardly ideal. Having Aaron come along, she reasoned, was the more efficient choice. The guards still seemed doubtful, pointing out that Aaron had appeared at the last moment and simply declared he was coming. Nova sighed and stated that this was exactly why everyone called him Scoundrel Aaron. As Nova mentally thanked Aaron for solving the problem once again, her thoughts wandered back to their previous meeting in her office, where she had informed Aaron of his promotion to a higher position. However, he had shown no enthusiasm as he was content with his current position, stating that it suited a scoundrel like him. At that moment, Nova had realized that trying to control Aaron would only drive him away, so it was better to let him stay in Kasserdik Fortress without digging further into his actions. As the carriage was finally ready to depart, Aaron smirked at Nova and teasingly asked if she had dressed up for the city, leaving Nova momentarily speechless by his remark. As the carriage traveled, Shon beamed with a wide smile and affectionately referred to Nova as Miss Orange, offering her a slice of cheesecake. Nova responded grumpily, stating she was a bit busy and suggesting he find Aaron if he needed someone to play with. Shon looked puzzled, wondering if he'd done something wrong. He explained that he used the nickname Miss Orange just like Aaron did, in an attempt to build a closer connection with her. Aaron sneered at Shon, correcting his pronunciation and urging him to be more precise. However, when Shon attempted to address Nova with the corrected pronunciation, she deliberately ignored him. Soon after, they reached Karzan, and Nova informed that she wouldn't need an escort as she would be working in the council, and further suggested they should go city touring in the meantime. She further instructed them to be in front of the tavern by the next day afternoon. Nova turned to Aaron and glared at him sternly. She ordered him to not cause any trouble there, specifically instructing him to use doors properly. Aaron responded by stating that the method of opening a door would remain the same, despite that he was in the city. Nova countered by saying that he went around smashing the door in Kasserdik too. However, Aaron gave her a reassurance before departing with Shon, but she remained uneasy given that Aaron hadn't properly responded to not cause any trouble. As they walked, Aaron turned to Shon and requested a city guide, prompting Shone to ask if he was interested in exploring the best restaurants in Karzan. However, Aaron responded that he would visit the restaurants later, and with a creepy smile on his face, he stated that he would go and kill the leader of the lone wolf that night. Shone was momentarily stunned by his remark, but his immediate thought was that Aaron was joking. Shone pondered in his mind, questioning whether Aaron believed he would be fooled again after the Nova's nickname incident. He assumed that Aaron was mocking the third-level administrator. With this in mind, Shone told Aaron to do as he pleased, adding that he didn't want to see Philip around anyway. Seeing his attitude, Aaron commented that their opinions seemed to match. Seeing Aaron acting too casual, Shone couldn't help but wonder that Aaron might have been taken aback because the situation didn't unfold as he thought it would. Immediately after, Aaron proposed visiting the cute rabbit to see the guys, to which Shone quickly agreed and provided him directions. As he had mistakenly taken Aaron's remark as a joke, he was curious to see how far Aaron would take it. And not long after they reached the cute rabbit's base, they were taken aback upon witnessing that the members weren't as cute as the name suggested. Unlike its name, the cute rabbit was a guild that used quite a bit of a force. Shone considered about stepping in as a third-level administrator if Aaron admitted that his joke had went too far. However, before he could act, his plan was interrupted by the unbearable stench of alcohol and sweat in the bar, prompting him to label the atmosphere as horrendous before taking off and leaving the men in bar enraged. The next in the line was Tavern's Drunken Widows, a place that Frosty Dagger painstakingly took care of, and the #1 tavern Karzan should avoid. However, Shone was stopped once again by the women, who referred to him as a VIP. At last, as Aaron and Shone strolled through the streets at night, Aaron remarked that the evening's experience would be good for their preparations. Meanwhile, Shone wondered how long Aaron was planning on joking around. Aaron then directed Shone to lead the way to the Lucky Gamblers, to which Shone responded that it was a casino run by the Lone Wolf and was even more dangerous than the tavern they'd visited earlier. However, Aaron's expression changed as he argued that they had all the reason to continue after coming this far. He insisted that they should smash down all the doghouses beforehand before catching their leader, who could be hiding anywhere. Upon hearing that, Shone remained frozen in his place as he gradually realized that it wasn't a joke in the first place, and that Aaron actually planned on killing Philip, who was known as the Demon of Karzan. Stunned, Shone inquired whether he was being serious, but Aaron dismissed his concern and commanded him to lead the way if they wanted to finish their work by the next day afternoon despite his resistance. Meanwhile, inside the Lone Wolf's casino, a huge commotion erupted, with people dashing around, pursuing the culprits and trying to put the fire out. In the midst of the chaos, Durin, the Lone Wolf's gatekeeper, stood calmly and observed the scene. The nights in that city were normally loud, but it was especially worse that day, prompting him to wonder if a war would feel like that. However, if a war really erupted, Durin's role as the Lone Wolf's gatekeeper would remain unchanged, and he would continue to stand guard. Just then, Aaron approached Durin with a hood over his head and asked about his evening. Durin assumed his was a drunkard, but Aaron pressed further, questioning why Durin seemed unfazed and was not taking a single step when the city seemed to be in havoc. In response, Durin sternly stated that guarding the Lone Wolf's casino was his duty. Aaron smirked, mentioning that other organizations didn't even seem to have gatekeepers, further inquiring if the boss of the Lone Wolf was a coward. However, Durin cautioned Aaron to choose his words carefully, stating that Phillips was invincible and that he had never encountered someone as cruel as him. Philip possessed a magic weapon capable of burning his opponent to a crisp in the blink of an eye. However, what's even more terrifying was the existence of the knight who protected him. Although he might be a drunkard knight with his right hand screwed up, the sword of humanity would still retain its status. On the top of that, there were a total of 40 organization members whom Philip used as his limbs, further gesturing that no one could ever touch him. Aaron thanked him for providing extensive information about Philip, noting that he could have easily ignored Durin and moved on, but Durin reminded him of his old self. Aaron then patted Durin's shoulder and promised to report his actions to his boss, leading Durin to believe that he was indeed a drunkard. As Aaron entered the casino, he declared that no human was immortal, be it a knight, a noble, or even the emperor, and that everyone would meet the same fate when their head was severed. Additionally, he advised Durin that when his boss met his demise, he should abandon this line of work and restart his life, stating that there might be something he would be good at. Durin was taken aback by Aaron's unexpected words about life. As Aaron entered, he quickly estimated the number of members inside to be around 40, and with the men patrolling outside, the total count would be approximately 35. Just then, it was revealed that Aaron had hired mercenaries from Cute Rabbit and Frosty Dagger, bribing them with gold to create chaos. Those people seemed to have pent up frustration against the Lone Wolf that they eagerly accepted the offer. Thanks to Aaron's diversion, most of the organization's members were swept up in the chaos outside. He even tossed Shone into the inn, freeing himself from his guidance. As Aaron strolled through the corridor, his lips curled into a slight grin upon encountering the drunken knight Durin had warned him about. Now it was time for Aaron to showcase his skills and fight well. The knight, behaten, swayed unsteadily before Aaron and mockingly scoffed on his face as he took a sip of liquor. Upon seeing him, Aaron pondered that behaten's right arm was damaged, but he could at least raise an alcohol bottle with that, confirming he was a disabled bum, just as the rumor stated. In contrast to behaten, Aaron had toughened his body through daily training, but despite that, his victory couldn't be guaranteed. As behaten closed in, Aaron felt an intimidating aura emerging from him. Suddenly, behaten charged at him with lightning speed with his sword unsheathed and landed a powerful blow on him. Behaten's movements transformed him into a different person, radiating destructive power. Unlike an ordinary sword, if one clashed against an aura-infused sword, their sword will shatter into pieces. Hence, knights usually aim to destroy their opponent's weapon first. As behaten closed in again with a murderous expression, he swung his sword, but Aaron dodged the attack with ease. Aaron countered the attack by blocking the path of a sword that had been swung with full strength, with his raw strength. Seizing the moment, Aaron landed a crushing punch, causing behaten to stumble backwards. Their strengths were on par, the odds of victory 50-50, and only a tiny margin separated their victory and defeat. With a swift precision, Aaron swung his sword and sliced behaten's head apart from his body in an instant. As behaten lay defeated, Aaron examined his own sword, noting a small chip. He then proceeded to take behaten's magnificent sword, murmuring that he would pray for his peaceful rest in return. Before leaving, Aaron remarked with a grin that despite his appearance, he was still an honorary conventual. Across the city, Nova's eyes fluttered open in the middle of the night, stirred from sleep by the sounds of commotion outside. She groaned, wondering if cities were always this restless at night. Pushing off the covers, she strode to the window and threw it open, ready to demand an explanation. But the words caught in her throat as the sight before her left her stunned. Flames roared through the city, consuming every house in their path, casting glow against the dark sky. Before she could fully process the disaster unfolding before her, a face flashed through her mind, and it was of Aaron. A sudden unease settled in her chest. She frowned, questioning why his face had surfaced at a time like this. Even if Aaron was a troublemaker, there was no way he would do something like this. Later, Aaron stood before an enormous golden door, remarking that some things would remain the same, including Thug's love for gold. He kicked the door open and was amazed upon seeing that he had decorated his room like that of a noble. Just then, Aaron was interrupted by a group of 4 men, who stepped forward and questioned how he dared to set foot inside. They declared themselves to be the 4 heavenly kings, warning Aaron that he wouldn't leave the place in one piece. Upon seeing their behavior, Aaron burst into laughter and stated that they weren't the heavenly kings, but rather 3 piglet brothers, with the 4th one looking so embarrassed of them that he was standing all the way behind the others. Just then, a low, deep voice spoke from behind, inquired how Aaron had managed to gain entry into the room, given that Knight Behaten was supposed to be guarding the corridors. As Aaron turned to face the speaker, a smirk displayed on his lips. He recognized the man immediately as Philip, the leader of the Lone Wolf. Without hesitation, Aaron shrugged and replied that he hadn't encountered anyone who looked like a knight. At that moment, one of the 3 Piglet brothers pointed at the sword in Aaron's hand, eyes widening as he declared that it was Behaten's sword. Philip's lips curled into a sly smile. He casually revealed that he had acquired Behaten for a hefty price, calling it nothing more than an unfortunate business deal. Then shifting his attention back to Aaron, he asked what had brought him all the way to his casino. Aaron met his gaze without flinching and with unwavering confidence declared that he had come to kill him. Philip burst into laughter, shaking his head as if Aaron had just told a joke. Amused, he asked if Aaron truly believed he had the confidence to kill him. Stepping forward, he began listing the powerful connections he had behind him, including first-level administrators, the mayor, and even members of the imperial family. He further leaned in and asked if Aaron was ready to make enemies of such influential figures. Then, with a sneer, he made an offer, stating that if Aaron bowed down and kissed his feet, his offense would be forgiven. But before he could finish his statement, Aaron moved. In a single fluid motion, he drew his sword and sliced Philip's neck clean in half. The room fell into stunned silence as Philip's body collapsed. Aaron tilted his head, mentioning that he was surprised Philip had walked so willingly into his range, further questioning whether he really thought those kinds of threats would work on him. A menacing grin stretched across Aaron's face as he casually mentioned that he was already being hunted by someone far stronger than Philip. As he turned his gaze toward Philip's burning corpse, something caught his attention. He bent down, picking up a ragged-looking stick, realizing that it was the magic weapon Jern had warned him about. Aaron exhaled sharply, muttering to himself that Philip hadn't come to this fight without a backup plan. He then called upon those heavenly kings and informed that he would be holding an interview for the leader's position of the Lone Wolf, and that everyone was free to show off their qualities. Dante, one of the heavenly kings, was stunned as he thought to himself that Aaron didn't even flinch at Philip's threat and severed his neck without hesitation. Now, as Aaron warned them of their certain fate, stating that they would be burned alive, the Heavenly Kings began to boast about their skills and tried to prove their worth. They claimed to have beheaded hundreds and kidnapped countless others without leaving behind a single piece of evidence. Just then, Dante suddenly intervened and slashed one of the kings, catching Aaron's interest. Dante seized the opportunity to introduce himself, further claiming that he had been in charge of the Lone Wolf's operations and requesting that Aaron entrust him with the position of a leader. At the administrative headquarters in Karzan, a member announced that the three major organizations had engaged in an all-out war the previous day. The exact number of casualties had yet to be tallied, but they considered themselves fortunate that the groups had followed their own unspoken rule with no civilian casualties. Just then, the meeting was interrupted when Shone burst through the door, slightly out of breath. He hastily apologized for being late, explaining that he had overslept. Upon inquiring about his identity, Shone introduced himself as the third-level administrator. The lady member in charge quickly reassured him that an apology wasn't necessary. Their attention then shifted to the box Shone was holding, and they mentioned that Shone had brought many presents for them. Shone hesitated, explaining that the gift wasn't for everyone, but rather something he had received from a friend during his journey, which he had brought along since he was in a hurry. The lady raised an eyebrow and commented that he was a little slow to catch on to things before gesturing for him to take a seat. As the meeting resumed, the members expressed concern about their lack of contact with the lone wolf. Philip was not the type to stay still for long, and they agreed that finding him as soon as possible should be their top priority. Meanwhile, a boy named Shore sneered at Shone, taking pleasure in mocking him for his unpunctuality, despite his commoner background. He eyed the box in Shone's hands and scoffed, questioning what kind of fool would bring a personal gift to a formal meeting. Shore continued to belittle him, declaring that a commoner like Shone had no hope of being promoted anytime soon. Shore had always enjoyed picking on Shone, and under normal circumstances, Shone would have let it slide. However, perhaps due to his recent alliance with Aaron, his patience had worn thin. He had no intention of tolerating Shore's taunts any longer. Shore smirked and suggested that whatever was in the box should have been handed off to the concierge instead. That was the final straw. With fury blazing in his eyes, Shone lunged forward, grabbing Shore by the collar and shouting that the box contained a gift from a friend. The room erupted into chaos as members scrambled to break up the commotion, but in the struggle, the box slipped from Shone's grasp and crashed onto the floor. Its contents spilled out, rolling across the ground, and a chilling silence filled the room. Shone's mind flashed back to his conversation with Aaron, where Shone had jokingly remarked that the only way a commoner like him could get promoted was by presenting Philip's head. And there was lying before him Philip's and his minions' severed heads. The members of the administration remained shocked at the sight before exclaiming that they finally found Philip. Earlier, Aaron had entrusted Dante with wrapping the heads nicely, stating that they were meant as a gift for someone. As Dante complied, he had inquired about the future of the lone wolf. However, Aaron had merely shrugged, telling him to figure it out himself and to manage the group properly. His only concern was ensuring that no one interfered with his mini-fridge, and once that was settled, his business in Karzan was finished. Before leaving, Aaron had given Dante one final set of instructions. He was to watch over Shone's back and allow Gatekeeper Jern to do as he pleased. Then, with a broad grin, he encouraged Dante to run things however he saw fit, so long as he didn't stir up trouble that would force Aaron to return to Karzan again. Without hesitation, Dante had nodded in agreement and assured Aaron that he would send periodic reports to keep him updated, along with some gold coins. Aaron had happily consented to that arrangement. After some time, Aaron visited a mage to undergo a cleansing magic ritual. The demon within him remained unimpressed, but Aaron instructed it to stay still, unwilling to waste his money. Once the ritual was completed, leaving the mage exhausted, Aaron stretched and exclaimed in delight, declaring that cleansing magic was far more incredible than he had expected, even more refreshing than a bath. The mage, still catching his breath, requested 20 silver coins as payment. However, instead of handing over the money immediately, Aaron inquired if the mage ever traveled for business, mentioning that he was raising a mage of his own. He then made an offer that if the mage visited Kasserdik and taught Kan a few magic spells, he would pay him in gold instead. As soon as Aaron flashed a gold coin, the mage's eyes lit up with desperation. He eagerly declared that he would even relocate his entire residence to Kasserdik Fortress if needed. Amused by the response, Aaron assumed that the mage's business wasn't doing so well, given that people in medieval times were unlikely to spend money just to freshen up. As Aaron turned to leave, the mage suddenly stopped him, blew his shoes clean with magic, and cheerfully called it a complimentary service. A while later, Nova strolled through the city streets, grumbling about the mess and disorder around her. Of all days, it had to be the one she decided to visit. Frustrated, she stormed into a building, flinging the door open and calling out for Aaron. However, the sight before her caught her off guard. Aaron was slumped across a couch, eyes closed and completely at peace. She was momentarily speechless, as it was strange to see him with such a relaxed expression while sleeping. Shaking off her surprise, she sat down on the couch beside him and got back to work, further remarking that he had slept for half a day just because he had stayed up all night. The following day, as Eren and Nova rode in a carriage back to Casterdick, Eren remarked that they had ended up staying one more night in Karzan. He smirked, thanking Nova for her consideration, saying he had never slept better. Nova rolled her eyes and immediately snapped at him to shut up, claiming that their extended stay had nothing to do with him and that she had simply had unfinished work. She then narrowed her eyes and asked whether he had caused any trouble during his all-nighter. Eren nonchalantly replied that he hadn't smashed any walls, just as she had instructed. Suspicious, Nova pressed for more details, but before he could answer, she withdrew her question, deciding that she didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to be his accomplice in whatever nonsense he had been up to. She sighed, concluding that he had probably picked a fight somewhere. What she didn't know was that he had, in fact, picked a fight, but back at the Lone Wolf headquarters. Immediately, her gaze then landed on the stack of armor piled beside Eren. Suspiciously, she asked about it, to which Eren smirked and remarked that they were excellent souvenirs, all made from iron. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he tossed an armor plate toward Nova. She caught it and frowned as she examined the piece, complaining that it seemed too small for her. Eren chuckled, stating that it was more than enough. She further argued that the chest area looked like it was going to get stuck, but Eren simply mocked her, claiming she was overestimating herself too much. Before their bickering could escalate, a sharp screech outside the carriage cut through the air. A split second later, a flurry of arrows struck the carriage walls, piercing through the wood. Eren swiftly examined the arrows and immediately recognized that they were made of stone. Further, he specified that only one type of creature would use such crude, low-quality weapons that not even mercenaries would bother with them. Those creatures were none other than goblins. As expected, a group of goblins emerged from the shadows, moving toward them with hostile intent. Eren quickly counted their numbers and estimated them to be at least 20. He frowned as he questioned what kind of goblins moved in such large groups, further wondering if there was a goblin village nearby. Without hesitation, he turned to Nova and instructed her to stay inside the carriage, assuring her that he would join her later after playing with the goblins for a bit. The goblins charged, but Eren met them head-on, slicing them down one by one with swift, precise strikes. Despite the heavy losses, the goblins persisted in their attack, seemingly unfazed by the deaths of their comrades. Eren began to wonder why they wouldn't retreat, unlike normal goblins who would flood at the first sight of their dead comrades. With the last goblin defeated, Eren deduced that they must be under someone's control. Nova inquired about it, and Eren explained that the black substance in the goblin's blood was a remnant of black magic. Nova looked confused, but Eren clarified that it was more complex than controlling corpses. Eren emphasized that the real question was why someone would go to such great lengths to come to this remote location, considering that Casterdick already had a record of black mages breaking in. Nova wondered aloud if they were targeting Lady Vivian again. Eren replied that they would uncover the truth upon their return to Casterdick, adding that he detested dealing with such kind of bothersome work. Back at the Casterdick fortress gate, one guard remarked that the fortress had been usually quiet lately. The other guard chuckled and mentioned that it was because Eren wasn't in the fortress for the time being. The guards were pleased with the decrease in carriage traffic and the peaceful inspection times. At that moment, they spotted Eren riding a horse, with Nova seated behind him and her luggage securely tied to the horse's rear. Confused, the guards inquired about the carriage, to which Eren explained that they had encountered numerous monsters on the way, which prompted him to abandon the carriage and clear up the path. However, when one of the guards looked down, he gagged at the sight of Goblin's Excalibur. When the guard inquired, Eren chuckled and explained that they were supposed to be great for stamina. Finding one in the market was like searching for a needle in a haystack, so he just harvested a few while he was dealing with the goblins. Immediately, one of the guards inquired if Eren would give him a discount if he bought them immediately, citing his curiosity about its effects. Eren replied that it would normally cost 70 copper coins, but he would give it to him for just 60, further emphasizing that they were freshly picked. However, Nova's face flushed with anger as she snapped, commanding them to do whatever they wanted later, as she wanted to go home and take a leisurely shower. Before departing, Eren tossed one of the goblins' Excalibur towards him, but it landed on his fellow guard's face instead, causing the other guard to burst into laughter. Inside the Laughing Rabbit Inn, the guards of Unit 4 were beaming with happiness as they admired and sported the armor Eren had gifted them. Dylan's eyes sparkled with excitement as he declared that he had never received such a generous gift, not even from his own father. Furthermore, Dylan brought up the incident at Karzan and asked how it occurred right when Eren decided to visit. In response, Eren pretended to be taken aback by the coincidence, but the other guards were well aware about the truth that it was Eren's doing. Just then, Henna arrived and Eren asked about her business. Henna's teeth clenched in frustration as she explained that sales were impossible without the ingredients, which were currently non-existent. To make matters worse, the carriages had stopped arriving and the Lord was even taking their rations. Her voice took on a growling tone as she added that even their pickled meat had been taken away, leaving barely enough food for them to eat. As she cursed the Lord on the top of her lungs, the bystanders tried to calm her down, reminding that she was being too loud, but she wasn't ready to calm down yet. Witnessing Henna's intense reaction, Aaron wondered aloud if she was drunk. Meanwhile, Dylan cautioned that it would be best to avoid her for the time being. In the heat of the moment, Kale intervened and gave Henna's headband a compliment. Her cheeks instantly flushed, revealing with a hint of smile that the headband was a gift from Aaron, leaving the group speechless. As Henna composed herself, Aaron turned to his group and inquired if anything happened while he was away. Vermin expressed his opinion that the countryside was a place of quiet routine where nothing much happened out of the ordinary. However, Vermin reported to Aaron that the church came looking for him in his absence, and that the newly appointed abbot from the capital was a hard man to please. Furthermore, Vermin revealed that rumors were circulating about a new force gathering in District 6, comprising entirely new faces. Aaron gave a light smack to Vermin's head, stating that there certainly was a lot of trouble during his absence. Aaron pondered that District 6 was a territory of Jackson and Scar, the father-son duo, further questioning who dared to assemble in such an area. With that in mind, Aaron decided to venture in the District 6 with Vermin, determined to get to the bottom of the commotion. As Aaron and Vermin made their way to the district, Aaron inquired if the locals still had a habit of defecation in the streets, noting the strange odor. Vermin informed him that the issue had largely reduced, thanks to Aaron's stern threat to punish anyone caught in the act by beheading their heads. Just then, Vermin diverted his attention towards the group, and without hesitation, Aaron immediately summoned them. A man from the group stepped forward, greeting them warmly, and asked if everything was all right, noting that they seemed to be working hard patrolling. Aaron looked at him curiously, admitting it was his first time seeing his face, and asked for his name. The man replied, stating that his name was George. Aaron asked about their purpose in Kasserdic Fortress, including his hideous friends. However, George remained composed and calmly explained that it was his deceased mother's hometown, and he had decided to settle there with his friends, who were working in another area after hearing that Kasserdic was a desirable place to reside. George added that he was considering starting a new job in a more secluded location. Aaron found himself at a loss for words as George continued to approach him with a calm and composed behavior. If George had been a little rude, Aaron could have responded with equal bluntness and have an honest conversation. Refusing to back down, Aaron took charge and ordered everyone to strip, insisting that this method would reveal whether they were connected to demons. As they complied, Aaron carefully examined each person and concluded that none of them showed signs of the demon's handprint. Despite no signs, the group's bodies were adorned with weird tattoos and writings. Aaron remarked that those markings suggested they hadn't been engaged in normal occupations. However, George simply handed him a silver coin and commented that it was just how life goes on. As soon as they departed, Aaron remarked that it was clear they had a history of living as thugs. However, he couldn't come up with any excuses for their behavior, stating that Scar would face significant challenges dealing with those people. Following his comment, Aaron turned to Vermin and bid him farewell, mentioning that he was heading to the church. Upon arriving at the church, Aaron was taken aback when Priest Blaine, in a fit of rage, asked him to kill Brighton, referring to him as a son of a bitch. Aaron couldn't help but think that Blaine was the real thug, as such language shouldn't be escaping a priest's mouth. When Aaron asked about Brighton, Blaine revealed that he was referring to the abbot from the capital, a vicious, demonic, and cursed individual. Blaine exclaimed that Aaron might think he was insane, but he confessed to being fed up with the repetitive prayer recitals, holy scriptures, and morning prayers. Aaron retorted that those were the duties of a priest, but Blaine screamed, requesting that Aaron at least beat him up if killing was too much. To sweeten the deal, Blaine offered Aaron a substantial amount of gold coins in advance, promising more money if he succeeded. Aaron found it ironic that a priest would request the murder of an abbot, wondering what kind of person Brighton was to provoke such a reaction from Blaine. However, Aaron's curiosity was short-lived as his personal encounter with Brighton quickly put an end to his questions. Upon meeting, Brighton scolded Aaron for not knowing the prayer recital as an honorary conventual, and even asked Aaron to follow along and read the prayers. Brighton scolded Aaron, asking if his life was too busy to memorize the Holy Scriptures. He went on to share his own experience, mentioning that as a conventual, he had read the Holy Scriptures while staying up all night with his eyes wide open. Brighton continued to lecture, dismissing Aaron's excuses and stating that everything was just a justification. He then handed Aaron a copy of the Scriptures since Aaron didn't have one. Brighton also mentioned that he would make sure to check on Aaron's progress when they meet again. He advised Aaron to come to the church at sunrise and suggested waking up a little earlier if he had morning trainings. After 3 hours of Brighton's non-stop lecture, Aaron felt completely drained of energy, and as Brighton began to leave, Aaron couldn't help but wonder what the reward would be for successfully completing this task. As Aaron closely observed Brighton, he noticed that Brighton took pleasure in scolding others. Aaron decided that if Brighton showed even a slightest hint of deception, he would not hesitate to throw a punch. However, to Aaron's surprise, Brighton seemed flawless without any loopholes, even going out of his way to give blessings to children. Aaron couldn't help but be impressed, remarking that Brighton was the first genuinely great person he had encountered among the medieval folks. As the children left, Brighton remarked that he hadn't initially thought Aaron was suited for the role of an honorary conventual. However, seeing how Aaron had stayed until the end of the day, Brighton believed Aaron had a strong faith. Brighton emphasized that faith wasn't about how much knowledge one had of the Holy Scripture, but still encouraged Aaron to read it. Meanwhile, Aaron thought to himself that he couldn't find a single reason to give Brighton a swift punch. Aaron concluded that hitting Brighton wasn't worth it, even for the sake of a pretty penny. He also decided to stay away from the church for the time being. As the sun rose next morning, Aaron was startled to see Brighton standing outside his house, encouraging him to join the morning prayer. Aaron immediately slammed the gate close, feeling a sense of fear and anxiety. He hadn't expected Brighton to come all the way to his house. As he remained inside, feeling defeated, Brighton called out to him from outside, asking if he trained every morning without fail. Brighton emphasized that working sincerely was also a form of faith and assured Aaron that he would stay by his side to ensure that he didn't miss his prayers as well as training sessions.